First spell I ever cast was not mine. That sounds impressive until I tell you I was 16, bleeding in a ditch, half frozen, officially disowned, and being roasted alive by a horned wolf the size of a wagon. My name is Caleb. I was born into a family where babies were tested for mana before they were given blankets. Our bloodline was famous for an inherited spell called Azure Fang, a high-speed blue flame that could cut through enchanted steel. My older brother Jonah awakened it at 9 years old and sliced a practice boulder in half by sneezing during training. Everyone called him a genius. Then there was me. When I was 5, they placed a crystal over my chest. Nothing happened. At 6, they tried again. Nothing. At 7, they brought in 3 specialists, 2 priests, and an old woman who claimed she could smell magical talent. The crystal stayed dark. The old woman smelled me for a full minute and asked whether I had recently eaten onions. That was the peak of my magical childhood. Every mage had a mana core. Weak cores were dim, strong cores glowed like stars. Mine was not weak, mine was empty. Completely empty. People kept calling it defective, cracked, dead, hollow, cursed, unfinished, and one especially rude tutor called it decorative. I preferred spacious. Unfortunately, being spacious did not help when everyone around me could shoot flames from their fingers. My family trained me anyway, mostly because they were convinced humiliation might somehow create mana. I ran until my legs shook. I memorized spell theory until I could recite 600 casting formulas backward. I learned monster anatomy, magical frequencies, rune structures, elemental weaknesses, dueling tactics, and battlefield geometry. I knew more about magic than most students twice my age. I just could not use any of it. Imagine knowing exactly how a dragon breathes fire, while your greatest offensive ability is throwing a chair. I became very good at throwing chairs. At 13, I could predict the movement of a fire spell from the caster's shoulder angle. At 14, I could identify a lightning variant by the smell of the air before it appeared. At 15, I beat 3 apprentice mages in practice by knocking their wands away before they finished casting. My father did not care. He wanted a son with magic, not a son who could explain why everyone else's magic was sloppy. Jonah was different. He never openly hated me. That would have required him to consider me a threat. He treated me like a strange household pet that had somehow learned to read. Whenever relatives visited, they watched him demonstrate Azure Fang. Then someone would point at me and ask what I could do. I usually said, I can leave the room before this gets more awkward. That was my rare talent. The final humiliation came when I entered Arcadia Academy. Arcadia was where the strongest young mages trained. Towers floated above the campus. Bridges rearranged themselves every hour. Practice arenas had enchanted walls because students occasionally missed a target and erased a building. I loved it immediately. Arcadia accepted me because my written score was the highest in Academy history. Then I stepped onto the mana testing platform. The examiner placed a hand-sized crystal over my chest. The crystal did nothing. 1,000 students watched. Someone laughed. Then everyone laughed. The crystal somehow looked embarrassed for me. I became famous before lunch. Not for being strong, not for being clever. I was Caleb, the noble with 0 mana. Students tossed sparks near my shoes to see if I would flinch. During elemental practice, I was assigned to carry targets because I could not activate them. In combat class, I was told to observe. That was where I met Marcus. Marcus was not gentle. He was the kind of instructor who thought a good warm-up involved surviving something dangerous. His hair was gray, his sleeves were always rolled up, and every wall near him eventually got broken. The first time he looked at my empty core reading, he grunted. I expected another insult. Instead, he asked me what I saw during the previous duel. I told him the winner wasted 40% of his mana, telegraphed every attack with his left shoulder, and only survived because his opponent confused loud explosions with strategy. Marcus smiled. For the next month, he let me stand near the arena and analyze fights. That was almost worse. I could see every mistake. I could imagine exactly what spell I would use. I just had nothing to cast. Then Evelyn arrived in our class. If Arcadia had a favorite student, it was Evelyn. She was 16, calm, terrifying, and born with an abnormal lightning core. Most first-year students could make a spark. Evelyn could call down a bolt strong enough to leave glass in the ground. She was not loud about it. That somehow made everyone else more annoying. Students gathered around her after every lesson, begging for advice, praising her bloodline, asking how it felt to be born amazing. She mostly ignored them. During our first strategy exercise, Marcus paired us. The task was simple. We had to cross a stone field while enchanted turrets fired harmless light bolts. Evelyn looked at me, then at my empty hands. I could practically hear her thinking that she had been assigned luggage. I told her the turrets rotated in a 7-shot pattern. She ignored me. The first turret fired She dodged. The second fired. She blasted it. The third fired from behind because she had broken the timing cycle. She barely blocked. I counted quietly. 3, 4, 5, 6. When the seventh shot came, I grabbed her sleeve and pulled her exactly one step left. 3 bolts crossed where her head had been. She stared at me. I told her to stop destroying the turrets because they were linked. She listened this time. We crossed the field without taking another hit. Afterward, she asked how I noticed the pattern. I told her I had years of practice, watching other people do fun things. That was the first time she laughed. It was also the last calm week of my life. My family learned that Arcadia had placed me in combat strategy instead of sending me home. My father came personally. He did not shout. That would have been kinder. He told me I was embarrassing the family by standing among mages when I had no magic. He said people were starting to joke that our bloodline had weakened because of me. Then he gave me a choice: withdraw from Arcadia willingly or be removed from the family. I looked at Jonah. He said nothing. That hurt more than my father. I had spent years believing that if I studied enough, trained enough, and became useful enough, someone would eventually admit I deserved to stand beside them. That day I finally understood. They had already decided what I was, so I made their decision easy. I took the family crest off my coat and placed it on the table. Then I left. No dramatic speech. No tears. I did steal 3 sandwiches from the kitchen. I had no mana and no inheritance. I was not about to leave hungry too. Arcadia did not officially expel me, but my tuition had been paid by my family, and without support, I could not remain in the dorms. Marcus offered to speak to someone. I refused. At that point, pride was the only expensive thing I still owned. I packed my books, 1 spare shirt, 2 knives, and a notebook full of spell diagrams. Evelyn found me at the outer gate. She did not give me a speech about friendship. She simply handed me a thick academy coat because the weather was getting colder. I almost refused. Then I remembered I was homeless, not stupid. I took it. She asked what I would do. I said I would figure it out. That was technically true. My first plan was to walk to a nearby town and find work copying magical texts. My second plan was to avoid dying on the road. The second plan failed first. A snowstorm rolled across the hills before sunset. Visibility dropped. I took a shortcut through a pine valley. That was when the horned wolf found me. It was a Class 3 monster, 6 feet tall at the shoulder, black fur covered in glowing red cracks, with curved horns that gathered fire mana. I knew exactly what it was. Embermoth, fast, aggressive, territorial, weak behind the front legs. Capable of firing compressed fireballs. I had memorized all of that. Very useful information. Unfortunately, my knife was still a knife. The Embermaw charged. I rolled aside and stabbed its flank. The blade bounced off. It whipped around and slammed me into a tree. I heard something in my ribs make a sound ribs should not make. Then its horns glowed. Fire condensed between them. I knew the spell pattern instantly. Compressed Ember Sphere. A simple monster spell. Simple did not mean weak. At that range, it would turn me into a charcoal drawing. I tried to move. My leg refused. The fireball hit me in the chest. For 1 second, the world became orange. Then everything went silent. I expected pain. I expected death. Instead, I felt something fall into the emptiness inside me. That is the only way I can explain it. My entire life, I had sensed the hollow where a mana core should be. It was like an open room with no light. The fireball entered that room and stayed. The flames vanished from my clothes. The heat disappeared from my skin. A glowing red sphere appeared inside my core. I was still lying in the snow. The Embermaw looked confused. I was more confused. It fired again. This time I raised one hand. The second fireball hit my palm. The flames twisted, shrank, and vanished into me. The red sphere inside my core brightened. Something changed. Knowledge unfolded through my nerves. Not theoretical knowledge. Not a diagram. Instinct. I suddenly knew how the monster shaped fire. I knew the pressure. I knew the release. I knew the exact feeling of the spell because my empty core had swallowed the pattern whole. The Embermaw charged. I pointed. A fireball formed above my palm. For the first time in my life, magic answered me. I laughed. The monster probably found that worrying. I fired. My fireball hit it directly in the face. The blast threw it backward through a tree. I stared at my hand. Then I did what any responsible new mage would do. I fired another one. And another, and another. I had spent 16 years with no magic. I may have overreacted. By the time I stopped, the clearing looked like someone had dropped a small sun into a forest. The Embermaw was unconscious, smoking, and missing most of its dignity. I walked closer. Its horn twitched. I immediately blasted the ground beside its head. It stopped twitching. Then I checked my core. The spell was still there. That was strange. Most mages used personal mana to create spells. The spell itself vanished after casting because it was only a shape made from their energy. But I had no energy. My core had absorbed foreign magic and somehow preserved its structure. I tried another fireball. The red sphere dimmed slightly, then recovered. That made no sense. So naturally, I spent the next 2 hours performing increasingly reckless experiments. I fired into trees. I changed the size. I compressed the fire. I split one fireball into 3 smaller ones. Every time I cast, the spell pattern remained inside me. The foreign mana replenished itself by pulling tiny amounts of ambient fire energy from the air. I was not generating mana. I had become a storage chamber for someone else's spell. A permanent one. I sat in the snow and laughed so hard my broken rib hurt. My family had spent 16 years staring at my empty core like it was a missing engine. They never considered that it might be an empty weapon rack. I had room. That was my power, not producing magic, keeping it. I looked at the Embermaw. Then a very dangerous thought entered my head. If one fireball could remain forever, what about another spell? I needed to test it. Preferably with something that would not kill me. That condition lasted about 1 day. I reached the town the next morning and spent my last coins on food and a room. Then I found a public practice yard. There were enchanted training devices that could cast low-level spells if you inserted coins. I had 6 coins left. The first device fired a water bolt. I stood in front of it. The operator asked whether I wanted a target dummy. I said I was the target dummy. He stared at me. I inserted the coin. The device hit me in the chest with water. My core swallowed it. A blue shape appeared beside the red one. Water bolt. I nearly screamed. I inserted another coin. Wind blades. Stored. Stone shots. Stored. Light orbs. Stored. Minor shield. That one was trickier because it was not an attack spell. I had to activate the device backward and hug the projector. The operator stopped asking questions. By the 6th coin, I had 5 new spells and a bruised shoulder. I walked out smiling like a criminal. The next step was obvious. Arcadia Academy had thousands of spells, and I knew exactly where they practiced. I returned 3 days after leaving. The gate guards recognized me. One of them asked whether I had forgotten something. I said yes. About 10,000 spells. Then I walked straight toward Marcus's combat yard. He was supervising first-year duels. Evelyn saw me first. Her eyes narrowed. I waved. Marcus looked me over and noticed the burn marks on my coat. He asked what happened. I told him I had discovered a small technical issue with my mana core. Then I asked him to throw a fire spell at me. Marcus stared. Evelyn stared. Half the class stared. Someone laughed and said 0 mana had finally damaged my brain. I pointed at him. Water spell, you're next. Marcus did not cast. He asked if I was trying to get myself killed, so I showed him. I raised my palm and fired an ember sphere into the practice wall. The explosion shook the yard. Silence. It was beautiful. I had imagined many ways to return to Arcadia. None felt as good as watching 300 students forget how mouths worked. Marcus approached slowly. He checked my hands. He checked my core with a crystal. The crystal still read 0. Then I fired another fireball. The crystal still read 0. That was when Evelyn walked directly up to me and punched my shoulder. I asked what that was for. She said she had spent 3 days thinking I was freezing to death somewhere. I told her I almost burned to death instead. She punched me again. Marcus finally agreed to test my ability, not because he believed me. Because curiosity is stronger than common sense in most good teachers. We went into a reinforced arena. He started small. A spark spell hit my arm. Stored. A gust hit my chest. Stored. A binding thread wrapped around my wrist. Stored. Every spell vanished into my core. My collection grew. Each one appeared as a different shape, floating in the emptiness. I did not just remember them. I owned them. Then Marcus tried something stronger. He fired a training flame lance. I caught it. The spell tore across my skin for half a second before the core swallowed it. That taught me the first rule. Absorption was not instant. Weak spells disappeared before doing meaningful damage. Strong spells hurt me during the moment they entered. Very strong spells could probably kill me before I finished absorbing them. That was bad. It was also useful, because if I could become tougher, I could steal stronger magic. Marcus immediately understood the same thing. He canceled the test. I asked him to continue. He refused. I asked nicely. He refused. I told him I had been waiting 16 years for magic, and he was now standing between me and free samples. He told me to sit down, so I did, for 8 seconds. Then Evelyn stepped into the arena. Lightning danced between her fingers. I smiled. Marcus said absolutely not. Evelyn asked whether I wanted to try. I said absolutely yes. Marcus started to object. She fired. A thin lightning bolt struck my arm. My entire body locked. I smelled burned hair. For one terrifying second, my heart forgot its job. Then the lightning vanished. A silver-blue branch of energy appeared inside my core. Lightning thread. I fell over. Evelyn ran forward. I lifted one finger. A lightning arc snapped from it and hit the ceiling. I started laughing from the floor. Marcus looked like he was reconsidering every decision that had led him to teaching. Over the next week, Arcadia became my buffet. Officially, I was still not enrolled. Unofficially, Marcus told anyone who tried to remove me that I was part of a combat research project. That was generous. It was also technically true. The project was mostly me standing in front of dangerous things. We discovered the second rule. I could not absorb ordinary mana. If Evelyn handed me raw lightning energy, nothing happened. I needed a finished spell. A complete magical structure had to strike me. We discovered the third rule. I could store different versions of the same element. A fireball from Marcus was not the same as then Burmaw's fireball. His version used rotation to increase penetration. I kept both. The fourth rule was even better. I could combine stored spell structures. That discovery destroyed an arena wall. I had Water Bolt. I had Wind Blade. I wondered what would happen if I wrapped spinning wind around compressed water. The answer was a jet of water so sharp it cut a steel target in half, continued through the wall, crossed an empty walkway, sliced a statue's hat off, and embedded the hat in a tree. Marcus stared at the hole. I named the spell Pressure Saw. He asked me not to name things until we knew how expensive the repairs were. I ignored that rule. Once I understood combination, I stopped thinking like a mage. Normal mages had limitations. Fire mages improved fire. Lightning mages improved lightning. Earth mages improved earth. Bloodline specialized because a mana core naturally favored certain structures. My core favored nothing, which meant it rejected nothing. I could combine wind with fire to create a spinning flame tornado. I could wrap Stone Shot in Minor Shield to create a bullet that protected itself from impact until the final moment. I could put Light Orb inside a water sphere and make glowing decoys. I could use Binding Thread with a gust to create invisible tripwires. I was no longer a mage. I was a problem with options. Students changed quickly. The same people who had laughed now followed me between lessons. Some wanted to see tricks. Some wanted to challenge me. Some wanted to claim my ability was secretly inherited. That last one made me laugh. My family had publicly discarded me. If this was inherited, their timing was incredible. Jonah arrived at Arcadia 2 weeks later. He was a third-year student, already ranked near the top of the academy. Until then, he had been away on field training. When he heard I was back, he came straight to the combat yard. Everyone gathered. I could feel the old tension crawling up my spine. Jonah had always been the measuring stick, used to prove I was a failure. He was everything I was supposed to be, tall, calm. Powerful azure fire curled around his hand as he approached. He asked what I had done, not how I was. Not whether I was safe, what had I done, so I demonstrated. I fired an ember sphere at a target. Jonah barely reacted. Then I used Water Bolt, Wind Blade, Stone Shot, Lightning Thread. His expression changed. I finished with Pressure Saw and cut 4 moving targets at once. For the first time in my life, my brother looked at me like he did not know where to place me. Then he said those were low-level tricks. There it was. I had expected anger. Instead, I felt excited, because Jonah had something I wanted, Azure Fang. Our family's signature spell, the spell I had watched my entire childhood. I smiled at him, then I told him to hit me with it. The yard became silent. Jonah thought I was mocking him. I was not. I had never been more sincere. Marcus stepped between us. He knew Azure Fang was not a training spell. It burned hotter than normal fire and carried a cutting edge that could slice before the heat even arrived. I had no idea whether I could survive it. That was a very reasonable reason not to try. Unfortunately, 16 years of humiliation had damaged my relationship with reasonable decisions. I asked Jonah to use the weakest version. He refused. Then I said maybe he was afraid I would learn it better than him. That worked immediately. Never underestimate sibling psychology. Jonah raised one hand. Blue flame gathered along his fingers, stretched into a curved blade, and condensed until the air screamed. Marcus started forming a barrier. Evelyn moved closer in case she needed to stop the attack. I spread my arms. Jonah released Azure Fang. The blue arc crossed the arena. It hit my chest. Pain exploded through me. This was nothing like absorbing a fireball. Azure Fang cut into my skin while burning at the same time. My coat split. I felt the spell digging toward my ribs. For one instant, I thought I had made the stupidest decision of my life. Then my empty core opened. The blue flame twisted. The cutting arc bent inward. The entire spell collapsed into my chest. A new shape ignited inside me. Blue, sharp, beautiful Azure Fang. I dropped to one knee. Evelyn reached me first. Marcus yelled something. I barely heard them. I was staring at Jonah. He was staring back. I raised one hand. Blue fire formed along my fingers. His face went pale. I had spent years watching him cast this spell. Years studying the angle. Years noticing tiny inefficiencies I could never prove. Now the magic itself was inside me, so I fixed them. Jonah's Azure Fang traveled as one curved blade. Mine split into 5. 5 blue arcs flashed across the arena. They curved around Marcus, past Evelyn without touching her. Then hit 5 separate targets at the same time. Each target slid apart. The final arc continued upward and shaved the top off a training tower. I stared at the damage. Marcus stared at me. Jonah stared at the tower. I grinned. I think ours has room for improvement. That was the moment everything changed. Before, Arcadia saw me as a strange student with a strange ability. After I used Azure Fang, every Bloodline mage in the academy understood the danger. I did not copy spells. I kept them. Forever, and if I understood their structure better than the original caster, I could improve them. Some students avoided me. Others suddenly became extremely polite. A few started wearing gloves around me, as if magic might accidentally leak out. The funniest were the proud Bloodline heirs. They had spent their whole lives saying their spells could only be used by chosen descendants. I ruined that sentence in one afternoon. One student challenged me to prove I could take an Earth family spell. I agreed. He fired a stone serpent at me. The spell was stronger than expected. A 30-foot rock snake slammed me across the arena. I absorbed it halfway through the second wall. Then I stood up with blood running from my nose and asked if he had anything rarer. He left. I kept the snake. I named it Gregory. Marcus told me not to name spells after random people. I told him Gregory had earned it. The academy leadership eventually decided I could remain under a special combat scholarship. I did not care what they called it. I had a room again. I had access to the library. More importantly, I had access to the dueling grounds. My life became training, not normal training. Normal training is repetition. Mine was controlled magical assault. Every morning, Marcus hit me with low-level spells while I practiced absorption speed. At first, even a moderate blast took almost a full second to swallow. I learned to pull the completed structure toward the empty core, half a second. A quarter, eventually weak spells, disappeared the instant they touched my skin. Then Marcus increased the power: fire, ice, wind, earth, sound. Force, illusion. I collected everything he was willing to use. Evelyn helped with lightning. She was more creative than Marcus. One day she asked if repeated absorption strengthened resistance to an element. I said maybe. She immediately fired 6 lightning spells at me. I woke up 10 minutes later with smoking shoes. The answer was yes. Every stored spell changed my body slightly. Fire magic made me more resistant to heat. Lightning improved the way my nerves handled electrical mana. Earth spells reinforced my bones. Wind improved balance. Water improved pressure tolerance. The effects were small individually, but I did not plan to stay small. I started requesting field missions. Marcus said no. I requested again. He said no. I followed him around for 2 days listing monsters with unique magical abilities. He lasted 48 hours. Our first mission took us to an abandoned quarry where crystal-backed boars had been attacking workers. Marcus came to supervise. Evelyn came because she claimed someone needed to stop me from licking cursed rocks. I had never licked a cursed rock. I had considered it. Boars used a defensive spell called Crystal Hide. That was all I wanted. The first boar charged. I stood in front of it. Marcus asked what I was doing. I said research. The boar hit me like a runaway carriage. I flew into a pile of gravel. Crystal Hide did not transfer. I had forgotten one important detail. The spell had to hit me. A defensive spell remained on the caster, so I changed plans. I made the boar angry, very angry. I threw rocks at it. I called its horns uneven. I am not sure it understood, but the emotion was correct. Then I used binding thread to loop around its rear leg, ember sphere to heat the ground, and wind blade to kick dust into its eyes. The boar activated Crystal Hide. I jumped onto its back. Marcus realized what I was doing exactly 1 second before I wrapped both arms around the glowing crystal shell. The defensive spell touched my body. My core swallowed it. The boar suddenly lost its armor. It looked offended. I activated my new Crystal Hide. Transparent crystal spread over my skin. The boar charged again. This time I did not move. It hit me. The boar fell over. I stayed standing. I had never experienced that before. Standing still while something else regretted the collision was addictive. Evelyn laughed so hard she had to sit down. I spent the rest of the mission collecting variations. One boar had crystal spikes. Another could launch shards. A giant one created a crystal dome. I hugged all of them. By sunset, Marcus stopped asking why. That mission taught me the 5th rule. Some spells could be stolen through sustained contact if they were active effects. That opened an entirely new category: armor, enhancements, regenerations, speed boosts. Maybe even curses, especially curses. Curses fascinated me because most mages hated them. They were difficult to remove and dangerous to study. I saw inventory. My chance came faster than expected. A month later, Arcadia's lower catacombs were breached by a monster that had been sealed decades earlier. No politics, no secret council, no conspiracy. Someone knocked over the wrong stone while renovating a storage tunnel. Sometimes disasters are refreshingly stupid. The monster was called a Gloom Widow. It had too many legs, too many eyes, and a body made from shadow webbing. It crawled into the academy basement and started cursing everything it saw. Doors aged 50 years. Practice dummies screamed. One staircase became unlucky. I do not know how a staircase becomes unlucky, but 3 people tripped on it in 5 minutes. Students were evacuated. Marcus ordered me to stay back. That sentence had lost all meaning in our relationship. I followed the containment group into the catacombs. Evelyn followed me. She said she was making sure I stayed back. We both knew this was a lie. The Gloom Widow attacked from the ceiling. Black threads spread across the corridor. Marcus burned them away. The monster opened its mouth. A dark symbol formed. I recognized the curse from my books. With her mark, anything marked would lose strength over time until it could barely move. A terrible spell. I wanted it immediately. I stepped out from behind Marcus. The curse hit me in the chest. Cold spread through my body. My muscles weakened. For half a second, my knees buckled. Then the core swallowed the mark. A black symbol appeared inside the emptiness. With her mark, I looked at my hand. A dark sigil formed. Evelyn told me not to look so happy about being cursed. I told her I had just added a terrible life choice to my collection. The Gloom Widow fired another curse. I took that too. Weight of Dread stored another. Silence Mark stored another. Rot Touch. I missed that one because Marcus yanked me backward. The spell hit a pillar. The pillar turned to dust. I agreed that one required planning. We fought deeper into the catacombs. The Gloom Widow was clever. It avoided direct combat and used curses to weaken us. That strategy was excellent against ordinary mages. Against me, it was educational. Every curse became mine. I used Withermark on its front legs. Then Weight of Dread on the ceiling above it. Then I fired Stone Serpent into the weakened supports. The ceiling collapsed. The Widow dodged, exactly where I wanted. Evelyn hit it with lightning. I stood in the path. Her bolt passed through me as I absorbed part of its structure, then I recast it behind the monster from the opposite angle. The widow was struck from both sides. It shrieked. I used crystal hide, jumped through a wall of shadow webs, and grabbed its body. The active shadow armor started flowing into me. New spell, Night Carapace. I activated it immediately. Black armor spread across my crystal shell. Marcus saw me stacking 2 defensive spells and looked physically tired. The widow tried Rot Touch at point-blank range. This was the dangerous one. I did not let it hit my body. I formed Minor Shield over my palm and caught the curse through the shield. The curse began dissolving the barrier. At the same time, I pulled on the completed spell structure. For 1 second, Rot Touch ate through my shield faster than I could absorb it. I added Crystal Hide beneath. The curse reached crystal. I kept pulling. The black energy collapsed into my core. Rot Touch stored. I laughed. The widow backed away. That was a beautiful moment. A monster made from nightmares looked at me and decided I was unpleasant. I hit it with its own Rot Touch. Half its shadow armor vanished. Then Gregory, my stone serpent, smashed it through a wall. Evelyn's lightning pinned it. Marcus finished it with a flame strike so powerful, I briefly considered jumping in front of that too. I did not. Growth was making me wise, slightly. Afterward, I sat on the floor with 12 new curse structures floating inside my core. Most mages would have called that horrifying. I called it Tuesday. Word spread beyond Arcadia. Not official announcements. Students talked. Traveling mages heard rumors. People started showing up at the academy gates asking about the zero-mana student who ate spells. Some believed I was fake. Some believed I was a monster. One man tried to sell me a cookbook. I bought it. It had excellent soup recipes. The attention created a new problem. Strong mages stopped wanting to duel me. Weak mages were curious. Strong mages understood that hitting me was a donation. They had spent decades perfecting secret techniques. I could take one to the face and potentially keep it forever. So I needed a way to convince powerful people to attack me. Fortunately, I had spent my whole childhood around proud mages. I knew exactly how to do that. I became annoying on purpose, not childish, strategic. There is a difference. When a famous duelist visited Arcadia, I asked if his celebrated flame spear always leaned slightly left. He corrected me by throwing it. Stored. When a windmaster demonstrated a sacred cutting technique, I asked whether it could split my coat. He accepted the challenge. Stored. When a gravity specialist said his spell could pin any student to the ground, I stepped forward and asked if he wanted to wager his reputation against my knees. He hit me with 10 times normal gravity. My bones screamed. My crystal hide cracked. My vision went black at the edges. Then the spell vanished into my core. Gravity well. I stood up slowly. Painfully. Then I used the same spell on the specialist. He went flat. I reduced the pressure immediately. I was not cruel. I was just extremely satisfied. Within 3 months, my collection had grown from 1 monster fireball to 73 spells. 73, I kept them organized mentally by shape, element, activation speed, and stupidity potential. The last category became increasingly important. For example, I learned a spell called Repulse, Simple Force Blast. Boring alone, combined with crystal hide on my feet, it became flight if I fired it downward. Not elegant flight, more like launching myself through the sky with invisible explosions. The first attempt sent me through a laundry line, the second put me in a fountain, the third worked. I came screaming over the academy towers with fire spiraling from one hand, wind shaping around my body, and repulse blasting from my boots. Students looked up. I waved. Then I hit a bell tower. After that, I added Minor Shield around my head. Improvement. I combined Gravity Well with Repulse to make a sphere that dragged enemies inward before exploding outward. I combined Silence Mark with Light Orb to create floating zones where spell chance failed. I combined Rot Touch with Stone Shot to make projectiles that dissolved enemy barriers on impact. Marcus banned that one from indoor practice. I combined Azure Fang with Evelyn's Lightning. The result was a blue electric blade that moved so fast it cut targets before the thunder arrived. Evelyn saw it and demanded I explain how I stabilized the plasma edge. I explained. She improved her own lightning control. That became our strange partnership. She hit me with spells. I stole them. I modified them. She stole the ideas back. Technically, we were both thieves. I was just more literal. Then Arcadia announced the Ascension Trials. This was the Academy's largest annual combat event. No crowns, no noble politics, no speeches about destiny. Just hundreds of young mages fighting through increasingly insane magical challenges to earn access to higher training grounds. I had watched the trials since childhood. The final competitors were treated like monsters. Jonah had reached the last stage the previous year. This year, everyone expected him to win. I entered. The registration examiner looked at my mana reading, 0. Then looked at the long list of spells I had demonstrated in class, then looked at me. He stamped the entry without asking questions. Smart man, Jonah found out before sunset. He approached me outside the arena. For months, he had avoided challenging me again. I think seeing Azure Fang in my hands had shaken something inside him. He told me the Ascension trials were not a place for tricks. I agreed, then I told him I had upgraded from tricks to disasters. He did not laugh. The first stage began the next morning. 500 students entered an artificial canyon filled with flying spell drones, shifting stone platforms, and summoned beasts. The goal was to reach the summit. Most students formed teams. I walked alone. Not because I was dramatic, because teams had started asking me not to stand in front of their spells. The first drone fired ice shards. I caught one. Stored the spell variation, fired it back. The drone froze. The second drone used a sonic burst. I let it hit. My ears rang. Stored, I combined the sonic burst with repulse and clapped my hands. The air exploded. 6 drones fell out of the sky. I kept walking. A summoned rock ape blocked the path. It pounded its chest and activated Iron Muscle, an enhancement spell. I smiled. The ape stopped pounding its chest. It sensed danger. I jumped on it. We rolled down a hill together. I absorbed Iron Muscle by contact. Then I activated it. My arms swelled with magical reinforcement. I punched the ape. The ape flew through a cliff. I looked at my hands. Iron Muscle plus Crystal Hide. Interesting. I added Gravity Well around my fist. Very interesting. I named the combination Meteor Knuckle. Marcus, watching from the observation tower, somehow heard me through the arena crystal. He told me not to test it near buildings. I immediately tested it on a mountain. I jumped. Repulse launched me upward. Gravity gathered around my right fist. Crystal Hide covered my arm. Iron Muscle tightened everything beneath. I fell like a cannonball and punched the mountain path. The entire ridge cracked. A shockwave rolled across the canyon. Students everywhere stopped moving. A section of the mountain slowly slid sideways. I stared at it, then I looked toward the observation tower. Even from far away, I could tell Marcus was shouting, "Worth it." I reached the summit first. Not by a little. The judges were still setting up the finish line. I helped them. The second stage was a dueling gauntlet. This was where I expected trouble. Every opponent knew my ability. They had one goal: do not let Caleb get hit by anything useful. The first student used only physical enhancement and a wooden staff. Smart. I used Gravity Well to make the staff weigh 300 pounds. He dropped it. Then I hit him with a gust and sent him out of bounds. The second used Summon Creatures because their claws were physical. Smarter. I cast Wither Mark on the creatures, Binding Thread on the ground, and Stone Serpent under their feet. Gregory had grown. I had learned to combine the stone spell with Crystal Shard. He now had spikes. Gregory looked magnificent. The third opponent refused to cast at all. He tried to tackle me. I activated Iron Muscle. He bounced. By the 10th duel, students understood there was no safe strategy. If they used magic, I learned. If they did not use magic, I already had 73 ways to make their day terrible. Then I reached the semi-final. Evelyn was waiting. The crowd went wild. She had not lost a duel all year. Neither had I. She knew more about my ability than anyone except Marcus, which meant she had prepared something specific. When the match began, she did not fire lightning at me. She fired it into the sky. Storm clouds formed over the arena. I understood immediately. The lightning was no longer her completed spell once it entered the natural cloud system. She had created weather. Actual lightning struck from above. I tried to absorb it. Nothing. It blasted me across the arena. I hit the ground smoking. Evelyn had found a gap in my power. She smiled. I smiled back. That was why I liked fighting her. I activated Night Carapace over Crystal Hide and ran. Lightning crashed around me. I used Repulse to zigzag through the arena. Another bolt hit. My defenses cracked. She controlled the storm indirectly by feeding mana into pressure zones, never shaping the final lightning bolt herself. Clever, I could not steal the strike, so I stole the cause. I launched myself upward. Evelyn realized too late. She tried to move the cloud. I flew directly into the storm. Wind tore at me. Lightning hit me 3 times. My hair may never emotionally recover. But the pressure pattern Evelyn used to build the storm was still active around the cloud. I spread both arms and pulled. The magic structure collapsed into my core. Storm seeds stored. The clouds vanished. I fell. Evelyn looked up. I created my own storm seed. Dark clouds exploded above the arena. Her eyes widened. I fired Azure Fang upward. Blue flame entered the storm. Then I added water bolt as vapor and used gravity well to compress the center. The cloud turned into a rotating electric fire vortex. I had no idea what I had made. Neither did anyone else. That made it better. Evelyn raised both hands. Lightning armor wrapped around her body. I used silence mark on the ground to disrupt her control field. She jumped aside. I used stone serpent. She shattered Gregory. I took that personally. I rebuilt him with crystal. She blasted him again. I used the debris as floating stone shots. She dodged. I used repulse behind the stones and accelerated them sideways. She blocked. I used the block as cover, appeared above her, and stopped Meteor Knuckle 1 inch from the ground beside her. The gravity field cracked the arena without touching her. She looked at the crater. Then at me. Then she stepped outside the boundary. I won. The crowd erupted. I helped her up. She asked what I had planned to do if she had not surrendered. I told her I would have panicked creatively. She said that sounded accurate. The final duel was Jonah. Of course it was. My brother stood across from me, surrounded by blue flame. This time he did not look dismissive. He looked angry, not wild anger. Focused anger. For 16 years, he had been the talented one. I had been the empty one. Now the entire academy was watching us as equals. Worse for him, some were expecting me to win. The match began. Jonah moved faster than I remembered. Azure Fang crossed the arena from 3 directions. I absorbed the first, dodged the second, cut the third apart with my own version. Blue flame exploded between us. He rushed through it with a flame-enhanced step. I used gravity well. He released a burst of heat that distorted the field. I used water bolt. He vaporized it. I used the vapor to hide binding threads. He burned through them. Good. Very good. For the first time, Jonah was showing me why everyone called him a genius. He had not stopped improving just because I had awakened. He shaped Azure Fang into a sword around his arm and came at me directly. I formed crystal hide and a blade of compressed wind. We collided. Blue fire carved into crystal. Wind screamed against flame. The arena shook. I could have used curses. I could have used lightning. I could have buried him under every spell I owned. I did not. I wanted one thing, to beat Azure Fang with Azure Fang. Not because I needed to prove our family's magic belonged to me. I had already proven that. I wanted to prove that being born with a gift and understanding a gift were not the same thing. Jonah swung. I watched the rhythm. He always rotated his wrist early before the third strike. I had noticed it when we were children. I stepped inside. His blade missed. I absorbed part of the flame along his arm through contact. Then I cast my Azure Fang from his blind side. He blocked. Exactly as expected. I split the arc. 1 became 2, 2 became 4. 4 curved behind him. Jonah released a ring of blue fire. I added lightning thread to my arcs. They accelerated through the fire ring. His defense broke. I stopped all 4 blades around him, 1 at his throat. 1 at each wrist, 1 behind his back. Blue lightning crawled through the air. Jonah froze. The arena became silent. I lowered my hand. The blades vanished. For a second, he looked like he might say something. He did not. He stepped out of bounds. I won the Ascension Trials. The same academy that had laughed when my crystal stayed dark now shook from people shouting my name. Caleb, the Zero Mana student. Except zero no longer sounded like nothing. Zero meant no limit on what belonged inside. I stood in the center of the broken arena, surrounded by smoke, crystal, shattered stone, and 1 extremely damaged Gregory. I should have felt complete. Instead, I looked toward the upper training towers. The Ascension Trials had 1 real reward, access to the Sky Vault. The strongest instructors stored dangerous spell techniques there, spells too destructive for normal students. Spatial blades. Body restoration, advanced gravity, rare curses, and one technique Marcus had refused to even describe. I had one entry. I smiled. The crowd thought I was celebrating. Marcus knew better. He covered his face with one hand. Because I had spent 3 months collecting spells, people were willing to throw at me. Now Arcadia was about to show me the ones they were afraid to use. The Sky Vault was not a room full of books. That would have been safe. Arcadia did not believe in safe. The entrance was a circular door at the top of the highest tower. There was no handle, no keyhole, and no warning sign. Marcus placed his hand on the door. It opened into a black hallway filled with floating doors. Each door led to a different training chamber. Some were normal arenas, some contained monsters. One opened into the middle of a thunderstorm, another looked suspiciously like the bottom of an ocean. I immediately loved the place. Marcus immediately regretted bringing me. He explained that the Sky Vault was not a library of secret scrolls. It was where Arcadia preserved combat experiences too dangerous for normal classes. Spell imprints, summoned environments, captured magical phenomena. The strongest instructors trained there because some techniques could not be learned from diagrams. I stared at hundreds of floating doors. My empty core practically felt hungry. Marcus saw my face. He told me I was allowed to choose one chamber per day. I asked whether that was a rule or a suggestion. He said rule. I asked what happened if I opened 2. He said he would throw me off the tower. I had repulse. That threat had lost power. The first door I chose contained a desert. Not a room painted like a desert, an actual pocket space. Sand stretched to the horizon beneath a white sky. At the center stood a black stone pillar. Marcus stayed at the entrance. I walked toward the pillar. The sand moved. A blade appeared under my foot. I jumped. A second blade cut across my shoulder. There had been no caster. No visible projectile. The space itself had split. I recognized the principle. Spatial severance, extremely rare, extremely dangerous, perfect. I stood still. Marcus shouted that standing still was generally a poor response to invisible blades. I told him I was narrowing the location pattern. A cut opened on my cheek. Another across my sleeve. Another shaved one eyebrow. I was going to look ridiculous for a month. Worth it? The cuts formed at fixed intervals around the pillar. They were not random. Each severance began as a compressed distortion, expanded into a plane, then collapsed. A complete spell pattern existed for less than 1/10 of a second. My absorption needed contact, so I needed one to hit me without cutting me in half. Easy. I activated Crystal Hide, then Night Carapace, then Minor Shield. Then Stone Armor, a spell I had picked up after the trials. Then Iron Muscle because I enjoy overkill. I looked like someone had wrapped a statue in darkness and regret. I stepped into the pattern. A spatial blade appeared across my chest. Minor Shield vanished instantly. Stone Armor split. Night Carapace tore. Crystal Hide cracked. The edge reached my skin. I pulled. The world around the blade stretched. For one terrifying instant, I could see the desert on both sides of my own chest. Then the spell collapsed. A thin white line appeared inside my core. Spatial severance. Stored. I took 3 steps backward. Marcus asked whether I was still in one piece. I counted. Yes, mostly. I raised one finger. A white line appeared across the black pillar. Nothing happened. Then the top half slid off. The cut was so clean I could see my reflection in the stone. I did it again. Second cut. Third. I curved the 4th. Marcus walked over and inspected the pillar. He told me spatial magic normally took years to control. I told him I had been studying the theory since I was 11. Knowing everything without being able to use it had been torture. Now it was a loaded weapon. The next day I returned and chose the ocean door. Marcus objected. I reminded him I had Waterbolt. He reminded me Waterbolt did not give me gills. Fair point. I chose another door. This one contained a room full of floating iron balls. The moment I entered, gravity reversed. I hit the ceiling. Then gravity rotated sideways. I hit a wall, then downward, floor, then diagonally, another wall. By the time Marcus stopped the chamber, I had discovered 9 exciting directions for pain. But I had also absorbed vector shift. Gravity well increased or reduced downward pressure. Vector shift changed the direction of gravitational pull. Together, they were absurd. I could make someone fall sideways. I could throw a stone shot upward and make it fall forward. I could launch myself by changing which direction counted as down. Repulse flight had been violent. Vector shift flight was elegant, for about 30 seconds. Then I forgot to reset the direction and fell horizontally through a window. Evelyn was eating lunch outside. I flew past her. She watched me disappear into a hedge. She did not even stand up. That hurt. Emotionally. The sky vault gave me spell after spell. Flash freeze, kinetic storage, heat sink, echo step, magnetic pull, glass skin, blink spark. A strange technique that turned sound into force. A stranger technique that turned force into light. A completely irresponsible technique that stored momentum inside an object and released it all at once. I tested that on a coin. The coin left the academy. We never found it. Marcus banned me from combining that spell with stone shot. I waited until he left. Then I did it. The target disappeared. So did the wall behind it, and a tree, and part of another wall. I quietly repaired what I could with earth magic. The academy started buying thicker targets. My biggest problem remained durability. I had more powerful spells every week. But absorbing high-level attacks still damaged me. If I wanted legendary magic, I needed legendary survival. That was when Serena finally appeared. Serena was the strongest mage at Arcadia. Not the head of anything. She hated meetings. She hated ceremonies. She hated titles. She spent most of the year traveling through dangerous regions, hunting magical disasters before they became bigger disasters. Students talked about her like she was a natural disaster with boots. Her specialty was spatial compression, not teleportation, not simple portals. Compression, she could fold distance until two places became neighbors. She could make an attack cross a mile in 1 inch. She could take a battlefield the size of a city block and squeeze movement until enemies felt trapped inside a box. According to Marcus, she once punched a flying monster from the ground by removing the distance between her fist and its face. I had never wanted to be punched by someone more. She arrived at Arcadia while I was testing vector shift on the roof. I saw a woman walking across empty air, no wind. No platform, every step folded the space under her foot. She looked around 30, wore a dark training coat, and carried no staff. She looked at the shattered practice walls, then at me. Then at Marcus, she asked one question. Is this the empty one? I liked her immediately. Marcus explained my ability. Serena listened. Then she walked over and placed 2 fingers against my chest. For a second, I thought she was checking my core. Then space compressed. I flew backward without her fingers moving. I crossed 50 feet in less than a blink and slammed into a padded wall. My core swallowed the spell. Distance folds, stored. I slid to the ground. Serena looked at Marcus. Then she said, "That is irritating." I stood up smiling. She understood immediately. I had taken one of her basic techniques. Not copied, taken. She asked if I could use it. I folded the space between my hand and a training bell across the arena. Then I flicked the air. The bell rang. Serena stared. I expected anger. Instead, she grinned. That was worse for the building. For the next hour, she attacked me with every low-risk spatial spell she knew. Distance folds, step fold, compression field, anchor point, redirect. She did not baby me. Marcus tried to slow her down. She told him I was still conscious. Apparently that was her safety standard. I loved training with her. Then she used restoration pulse. I was sitting on the ground with bruised ribs, cuts, burns, and one shoulder facing a direction shoulders rarely choose. Serena placed a hand over me. Golden white light spread through my body. Bone snapped back into place. Cuts closed. Bruises faded. My shoulder reconsidered its decisions. I felt better in seconds. Then the healing light vanished into my core. A new pattern appeared. Restoration pulse. I stopped breathing. Serena noticed. Marcus noticed. Evelyn, who had joined halfway through because explosions were visible from class, noticed. I raised my hand over a cut on my arm. Golden light appeared. The cut closed. I stared at it. Then I started laughing. Evelyn covered her face. Marcus said no. I had not even said anything. He knew. I activated every dangerous spell I had been afraid to test, not on other people. On myself, I launched upward with maximum repulse, vector shifted sideways, hit a wall, healed. I let Serena use a stronger compression wave, healed. I tested double crystal hide until the recoil cracked my wrist, healed. I activated heat sink, absorbed all warmth around my hand, accidentally froze 3 fingers, healed. I was not immortal. Restoration pulse required stored energy from ambient light and took time to recover after heavy use. It could repair damage. It could not revive me if my head became a separate project. Important distinction. But my ceiling had risen. A lot. I could now survive stronger spells long enough to absorb them. That changed my goals. Before Restoration Pulse, I collected what I could survive. After Restoration Pulse, I started hunting what I wanted. Serena understood. She told me about a creature called the Ash Phoenix. It lived inside a volcanic crater 3 days from Arcadia. Unlike normal Phoenix legends, it did not resurrect after death. It simply refused to stay injured. Its body constantly regenerated using a spell called Eternal Ember. Restoration Pulse was active healing. Eternal Ember was passive. If I could absorb it, my body might regenerate continuously. Marcus said the word might with great emphasis. I heard the word regenerate. We left the next morning. Serena came because she wanted to see what happened. Marcus came because he did not trust what happened. Evelyn came because she had already packed. Those were the 4 people who had somehow become my regular audience. The crater was enormous. Black rock, red rivers of lava, ash falling like snow. At the center, the Ash Phoenix slept on an island of cooled stone. It was 20 feet tall, covered in red gold feathers, and surrounded by a heat haze that made the air bend. I had fire resistance from dozens of spells. I had heat sink. I had crystal hide. I still started sweating before we reached the bottom. The Phoenix opened one eye, then both, then it screamed. The sound hit like a physical wall. I absorbed the sonic spell. New variation, nice. It spread its wings. Flames exploded across the crater. Serena folded space around our group, redirecting the worst heat. Evelyn formed lightning around herself. Marcus raised a fire barrier, because apparently fighting fire with more fire is normal among fire mages. I walked forward. The Phoenix launched a spear of molten flame. It hit my crystal hide. The crystal became liquid. Night carapace burned away. The spell reached my skin. My core pulled molten lance, stored. My arm was badly burned. Restoration Pulse repaired it. The Phoenix fired again. I caught that one with heat sink, stored a stronger version. The creature became furious. I became delighted. I wanted Eternal Ember. That was not a projectile. It was wrapped around the Phoenix's entire body, so I needed contact. Again, I was developing an unfortunate pattern. I used vector shift. Down became forward. I fell sideways across the crater at terrifying speed. Repulse added more. Distance fold removed the final 100 feet. I appeared directly above the Phoenix. It looked up. I had 1 second to appreciate how bad my plan was. Then I hugged its head. Fire exploded around me. My defenses vanished almost instantly. Skin burned. Restoration Pulse activated. Burned. Healed. Burned. Healed. My core searched for the active spell touching me. There were too many layers. Flame aura, heat shield, feather reinforcement, regeneration. I pulled everything I could. The Phoenix shook its head violently. I held on. It flew. That was unexpected. We shot out of the crater. Evelyn yelled something from below. I could not hear her because I was clinging to a flaming bird, moving faster than sound. The Phoenix rolled. I rolled with it. The world became sky, crater. I absorbed feather guard. Nice. I absorbed thermal veil. Very nice. I found Eternal Ember. The pattern was deep. It was woven through every cell of the creature's magical body. My core opened wider. The Phoenix felt it. Its regeneration flickered. It screamed, then it climbed straight upward. I realized what it was doing. It wanted to reach thin air and drop me. Clever bird. I pulled harder. The regeneration spell stretched between us like a web of fire. Then it snapped. Eternal Ember collapsed into my core. I immediately let go. The Phoenix continued upward. I continued not upward. Gravity remembered me. I fell a lot. I activated step fold. Folded 50 feet. Wrong direction. I fell faster. I corrected with vector shift. Now down was sideways. I flew toward a mountain. Bad. Repulse. Too much. Now I was spinning. At this point, controlling 4 movement spells while falling from the sky felt unnecessarily complicated. So I stopped. I turned gravity normal, crossed my arms, activated every defensive spell I had. Then I hit the ground. The impact made a crater, silence, dust fell. I opened one eye. Everything hurt. Then I felt heat moving through my bones. Not painful heat, living heat. Eternal ember burned inside my core. Golden red lines spread under my skin. Cracks in my crystal hide repaired. Bruises faded. My ribs fixed themselves without restoration pulse. I sat up. Serena appeared at the crater edge. Evelyn and Marcus arrived seconds later. Marcus stared at the hole, then at me. I said passive regeneration. He sat down right there on the ground. I think he needed a moment. The ash phoenix landed on the mountain above us. It glared. I expected another attack. Instead, it flared its feathers. Its regeneration restarted. I had not taken the spell away from it. I had copied the complete structure into my empty core. Important distinction. I waved. The phoenix screamed and flew away, probably for the best. Eternal ember changed everything. It did not make me invincible. Massive injuries still required time. A severed limb was still a major problem. I tested none of those things on purpose. Marcus made me promise. But smaller injuries healed constantly: burns, cuts, cracks, bruises, mana strain. That meant my body could absorb dangerous spells repeatedly instead of requiring long recovery. Serena saw the direction immediately. She took me to a mountain training ground far from Arcadia. No buildings, no students, no expensive statues. She stood across from me. Then she asked if I wanted one of her serious techniques. My answer was so fast it echoed. She raised one hand. The mountain behind me disappeared. Not exploded, not shattered. A section the size of a house compressed into a black point. Then the point vanished. I stopped smiling. Serena explained the spell. Zero distance crush. It did not hit like a projectile. It folded all distance inside a target area toward one center. Anything caught inside would be crushed from every direction. I asked for a weak version. She said she had already shown me the weak version. I reconsidered my life, briefly. Then I started building a survival plan. This was where people misunderstood my power. They thought getting hit was easy. It was not. The strongest spell in the world was useless to me if I died before absorbing it. So every legendary technique became a puzzle. What part of the spell completed first? Where did damage begin? Could I intercept the structure before maximum output? Could I use barriers to slow it? Could I split the spell? Could I redirect some force while keeping enough contact to absorb the pattern? For zero distance crush, I used anchor point on my own body so space would resist movement. Then crystal hide, night carapace, stone armor, iron muscle, eternal ember, restoration pulse ready. Gravity well expanding outward to oppose compression, repulse pulsing from my skin. Finally, I used spatial severance to cut tiny escape channels through the forming fold. Serena watched, then nodded. She cast. The world collapsed. My barriers shattered at the same time. Every bone in my body felt squeezed. My vision turned white. Eternal ember roared. Restoration pulse activated automatically because I had tied its trigger to physical damage using a binding spell. The compression pushed harder. My spatial severance channels broke. I felt the completed structure touch my core. I pulled. Nothing happened. Too dense. I pulled again. My knees hit the ground. Blood ran from my nose. Serena began canceling the spell. I shouted for her not to. She did not listen. Good. That was the correct choice. The spell weakened. At the moment it loosened, I used gravity well inward. Instead of resisting the compression, I matched it. For one tiny instant, my body and the spell moved in the same direction. The pressure difference dropped. My core caught the pattern. Zero distance crush collapsed into me. The mountain became quiet. I fell forward. Eternal ember started repairing everything. Serena knelt beside me. I could barely move. I lifted one finger. Space bent above a boulder. The boulder compressed into a pebble. Serena looked at it, then at me. I smiled through a mouth full of blood. She called me an idiot. I told her that sounded jealous. She laughed. I had just acquired the strongest spell I had ever touched. Naturally, that became insufficient within a week. My collection passed 100 spells. Then 150, then 200. Not all were powerful. I collected weird things too. A cleaning spell that removed dust. A scent spell used by hunters. A warming spell. A cooling spell. A spell that made bread rise faster. Never underestimate utility. I once defeated a slime monster by using the bread spell on it. The slime expanded until it got stuck between two rocks. Marcus refused to discuss that mission. I gained a levitation spell from a traveling performer. A color-changing spell from an illusionist. A sticky resin spell from a forest monster. I combined those three and created floating rainbow traps. Evelyn called them embarrassing. Then she used one to catch 5 flying monsters at once. She stopped complaining. My strangest acquisition came from a cursed bell. Anyone who heard it lost their sense of direction. I rang it near myself. The curse hit stored compass break. Later combined it with vector shift. Enemies would think they were moving forward, while gravity quietly convinced them forward was left. Watching people run confidently into bushes was one of my simpler joys. But the stronger I became, the harder it was to find useful attacks. Arcadia students could not challenge me anymore. Most instructors had already donated their favorite techniques. Visiting mages became cautious. I needed a bigger stage. That was when Serena told me about the Grand Convergence. It was not a tournament for beginners. Once every few years, combat academies, monster hunters, wandering masters, and bloodline specialists gathered at an enormous neutral training ground called the Basin. The Basin had been created by an ancient meteor impact, miles of empty stone. No buildings nearby, no civilians. Basically, the perfect place for mages to behave irresponsibly. People went there to test techniques against other experts, trade combat knowledge, hunt summoned beasts, and prove whose magic hit hardest. I heard whose magic hit hardest and started packing. Marcus said I could not collect every spell there. I asked why not. He said because some people would try to kill me. I reminded him I had regeneration. He reminded me death was still inconvenient, fair. We traveled for 4 days. As we approached the Basin, I could feel magical pressure from miles away. Fire pillars climbed into the sky. Lightning storms flashed over distant cliffs. A giant ice creature collapsed somewhere to the west. The ground shook twice. Evelyn looked excited. Marcus looked concerned. Serena looked bored. I looked hungry. Thousands of mages filled the Basin. I recognized bloodline symbols from textbooks. Families that specialized in sound, ash, metal, gravity, mist, crystal, lightning, poison, stars. Heat, cold, bone reinforcement, wind pressure. Some techniques had been guarded for centuries. And there I was with the magical equivalent of an empty suitcase. The first challenge happened before we reached the central grounds. A young bloodline mage saw me use repulse to jump across a gap. He recognized me from rumors. Then he laughed. Apparently, people outside Arcadia had developed a theory that I could only steal weak spells. I loved rumors. They brought volunteers. He specialized in metal magic. He shaped a dozen iron blades from the ground and sent them at me. I used magnetic pull. Blades curved away. He changed the metal into liquid. Interesting. The liquid wrapped around my arms and hardened. I could not absorb it because the final material was physical. Very smart. I used heatsink in reverse. Instead of removing heat, I released stored thermal energy into the metal. It softened, then stone armor expanded underneath and snapped it. The mage frowned. He activated his bloodline technique, Silver Fortress. Metal particles from the entire field rushed around his body, creating a giant armored shell. Not worn armor, a moving fortress of floating metal plates. Important difference. He raised one enormous fist. I smiled. He punched. I used distance fold. The fist traveled farther than he expected and hit the ground behind me. I jumped onto the arm. Then I ran toward the center of the fortress. He tried to shake me off. I used gravity well on my feet. He increased the metal pressure. I activated spatial severance and cut a path between the floating plates without touching him. Then I placed both palms on the active magical field, controlling the fortress. My core pulled, Silver Fortress collapsed into me. Every metal plate fell at once. Mage stood in the middle wearing normal clothes and a deeply offended expression. I activated Silver Fortress. Metal rose around me, but I did not shape it like armor. I shaped it like a 40-foot hand, then I waved. The Basin erupted in laughter. Mage stared. I gave the spell back by dismissing mine. he still had his. Again, I did not remove magic from people. I copied the structure. That mattered because if I actually stole magic permanently from others, the entire world would have hunted me by lunch. Instead, attacking me was merely humiliating, much more manageable. The grand convergence became the greatest week of my life. Every hour someone new challenged me. A sound specialist hit me with a resonance wave that made my teeth vibrate. Stored, I combined it with stone serpent. Gregory could now roar. The roar shattered glass. Evelyn asked why a stone serpent needed to roar. I said morale. A mist specialist used phantom fog. Stored. I filled the arena with fog, then added light orb to create hundreds of glowing silhouettes. A poison mage launched venomous magic. I absorbed the magical poison pattern, then used eternal ember to purge the physical residue. Stored, a sand mage buried me under a dune. I used vector shift and made the entire dune fall upward. A heat specialist created a miniature sun. I used heat sink until my teeth hurt, absorbed the spell, then combined it with gravity well. Tiny sun with gravity. Marcus made me promise never to cast that near Arcadia. I named it Pocket Star. He looked older. Every challenge increased my collection. Every new spell created combinations nobody else could use. Normal mages spent years designing techniques within one magical language. I spoke hundreds. I mixed them without respect for tradition. A lightning spear became a teleport marker when combined with step fold. A crystal dome became a rolling ball when combined with vector shift. I climbed inside and rolled down a hill at 200 miles per hour. I hit 6 targets. Then a lake. I came out clean because of the cleaning spell. That is efficiency. A shadow movement spell combined with light orb created a flash step where I vanished from darkness and reappeared inside my own light. A freezing curse combined with pressure saw created ice blades that froze whatever they cut. A kinetic storage spell combined with repulse let me punch something softly, store the force, then release 10 punches later through the same point. I tested that on a boulder. The boulder survived 9 taps. On the 10th, it remembered all of them at once and became weather. People stopped calling me the Zero Mana student. They started calling me the empty archive. I hated that. It sounded like a quiet building. I told Evelyn I wanted something more impressive. She suggested Caleb. I kept Caleb. On the 4th day of the convergence, Jonah arrived. I had not known my family was attending. They came every cycle to demonstrate Azure Fang and compare it against other flame bloodlines. My father was with him. So were relatives who had spent my childhood looking disappointed in my direction. They saw me from across the basin. I saw them. For a moment, all the noise around me faded. It is easy to imagine you will feel nothing when the people who rejected you finally see you succeed. That is a lie. I felt everything. Anger, pride, old embarrassment. A stupid little part of me still wanted my father to look impressed. I hated that part, so I focused on the useful thing. Jonah had improved Azure Fang again. Blue flame around him had become almost white at the edge. He had not given up after losing to me. Good. I did not want him weak. I wanted him unable to use me as an excuse. My father approached. He looked at the basin around us. Cratered stone, collapsed targets, mages whispering. Then he looked at me. He said he had heard rumors. I told him most were probably true. He asked whether I still carried our bloodline technique. I raised one finger. Azure Fang appeared. Then I split it into 12 arcs. Then each arc gained lightning, then crystal, then spatial severance edges. 12 blue-white blades circled me like a storm of glass. My father stopped speaking. I could have ended the moment there. It would have been satisfying. Instead, someone behind us laughed. A legendary flame specialist from another bloodline had heard the conversation. He called Azure Fang pretty but shallow. My father immediately bristled. I immediately became interested. The specialist's family technique was called Sun Eater Flame. Black fire that consumed other magic as fuel. I had read about it. Rare. Difficult? Perfect. I asked him to demonstrate on me. He thought that was a joke. Then several people around us started explaining who I was. His smile changed. He loved the idea. He raised one hand. Black fire formed. My father stepped back. Jonah watched carefully. The specialist fired. Sun Eater Flame hit me. My crystal hide ignited. That was new. The black fire burned magic itself. Night carapace became fuel. Stone armor became fuel. Even my miner's shield made the flames stronger. I had built defenses that were feeding the attack. Brilliant. I dropped every magical barrier. The flames reached my skin. Eternal Ember fought them. But Sun Eater Flame started consuming the regeneration energy too. Bad. Very bad. My core pulled. The spell resisted. It had been designed to eat foreign mana. My empty core had no native mana. That was the advantage. There was nothing inside me for it to consume except stored spells, and those structures were anchored deeper than normal magical output. I isolated the fire inside a blank region of my core. No other spell touched it. The Sun Eater Flame starved. Then I swallowed the structure. Black fire appeared in the emptiness. Stored, I exhaled smoke. The specialist nodded, impressed. My father looked sick. I raised my hand. Black fire formed. Then I did something the specialist could not. I wrapped Sun Eater Flame around Azure Fang. Blue and black twisted together. The blue flame cut. The black flame consumed defenses. I added spatial severance. Then lightning thread. Then magnetic pull to make the blade curve toward metal targets. I released one arc. It crossed the field, cut through 7 enchanted barriers. Ate the magic inside each one, curved around a stone tower. Returned like a boomerang, then stopped above my palms. Silence. I had just combined 4 famous magical traditions in one attack. I looked at my father. He had spent my whole life worshipping one inherited technique. I was holding it inside a spell made from 4 bloodlines at once. And I was not finished. More specialists gathered. Some wanted to test me. Some wanted to show off. Some wanted to prove their family technique could not be absorbed. That sentence became my favorite invitation. An ice bloodline used absolute frost, stored. A force bloodline used King's Push, stored. A crystal bloodline used Diamond Bloom, stored. A sound bloodline used Thunder Choir, stored. A gravity bloodline used Falling Heaven. That one put me underground, still stored. A shadow specialist used Black Step, stored. A light specialist used Solar Lance, stored. A curse master used Ninefold Misfortune. I spent the next hour being attacked by falling rocks, broken sandals, aggressive birds, badly timed sneezes, and one incredibly determined goat. The curse manipulated probability. I absorbed it eventually. Then I used it on an empty target dummy. The dummy immediately fell over for no reason. I liked that one. By sunset, I had collected signature techniques from 23 famous bloodlines. My body hurt. Eternal Ember was working overtime. My coat had become theoretical. Evelyn tossed me a replacement. I asked how many she had packed. She said 12. That was offensive, also practical. My father had watched almost the entire thing. At first, he stood with our relatives. Then the crowd shifted around me. Powerful mages began asking questions. Not mocking, asking. How had I modified the spell? How did I stabilize 2 opposing elements? Could I demonstrate the gravity-like combination again? I answered when I felt like it. I did not chase their approval. That was new. For years, I had wanted one room to accept me. Now I had outgrown the room. The moment became even better when Jonah stepped forward. He asked for another duel. Not angrily, seriously. I agreed. We fought at sunset. No huge crowd announcement. No ceremony. People simply noticed and gathered. Jonah opened with a new Azure Fang pattern. Instead of one blade, he created a rotating ring. Smart. It protected him while firing arcs outward. I used magnetic pull on the blue flame. Nothing. Fire was not metal. I knew that. I was testing whether the enchanted particles from his focus bracelet affected the trajectory. They did. The ring tilted. Jonah corrected instantly. He launched upward with flame. I followed with vector shift. We fought in the air. Blue arcs crossed. I stepped behind him. He anticipated it. His elbow hit my face. Good. I used distance fold to make his next punch travel 2 extra feet. He overextended. I caught his wrist, not to absorb Azure Fang. I already had it. I used kinetic storage. His punch momentum entered my palm. Then I added mine. We traded physical strikes while magical blades exploded around us. Jonah was stronger than during the Ascension trials, much stronger. He had stopped trying to prove he was naturally better and started training like he could lose. That made him dangerous. I respected it, so I stopped holding back. Silver Fortress formed around me. Jonah burned through it. Phantom fog covered the air. He used heat to clear it. Compass break distorted direction. He closed his eyes and followed my sound. I used silence mark. He sensed heat instead. I used heat sink. He smiled. He had expected it. Then he released the technique he had been developing. Azure Fang collapsed around his body. All the blue flame compressed into a single line along his arm. The edge turned white. He rushed me. No projectile. No wasted energy. Just speed and one perfect cut. I could have used zero distance crush. I could have ended it. Instead, I watched shoulder, hip, wrist. Timing. I understood. At the final instant, I used step fold, not to dodge, to move 3 inches closer. Jonah's cutting arc had been shaped to reach maximum density 6 inches from his hand. I entered before the edge fully formed. His forearm hit my crystal hide. The incomplete blade scraped past my side. I placed my palm on his chest. Then I released all the kinetic energy I had stored from our earlier punches. One tap, Jonah flew backward across the field, bounced twice, and stopped inside a crater. He sat up. I asked if he was done. He said no. Then he fell over. I won, but this time, when I offered my hand, he took it. My father walked closer. He looked like he wanted to say something. An apology, an explanation, maybe an offer. I did not know. I did not need to know yet, because the ground started shaking. At first, everyone assumed it was another duel. Then the center of the basin cracked open. A line of red light spread through the stone. Serena's expression changed immediately. That scared me more than the crack. She never looked concerned. The basin had formed from an ancient meteor impact. Everyone knew that. What most people did not know was that something had survived inside the meteor, not a creature exactly. A magical organism, a living core surrounded by layers of mineral. It had slept underground for centuries. All the magical energy released during the Grand Convergence had finally warmed it enough to wake. Important note, it did not wake because of me specifically. Thousands of mages had been blasting the basin for days. For once I was only partially responsible. The ground exploded. A blackered structure rose from below. At first it looked like a tower, then it unfolded, 6 enormous limbs. A central body made from meteor stone, cracks glowing with every color. No eyes, no mouth, just a floating core inside a shell of impossible rock. The pressure flattened weaker mages instantly. I stayed standing with gravity well countering it. Serena folded space around the crowd to create distance. Marcus began directing people toward the outer ridges. Evelyn came to my side. Jonah stood on the other. The meteor creature raised one limb. Every loose spell in the basin bent toward it, fire from distant duels. Lightning in the clouds, residual curses, heat, sound, it absorbed all of them. I stared. For half a second my heart stopped, not because it was like me. It was not. The creature absorbed raw magical energy and converted it into destructive output. It did not permanently preserve spell structures. Still, watching something else swallow magic felt rude. Then it fired. A beam of mixed energy crossed the basin. Serena folded the space. The beam curved upward. It hit the sky. Clouds split for miles. Everyone stopped treating the situation like a training event. The creature fired again. Dozens of masters attacked it. Fire, ice, lightning, gravity, metal. The spells hit its meteor shell. The shell absorbed the energy. The cracks brightened. It grew stronger. I shouted for everyone to stop casting. Too late. The creature released the stored energy in a shockwave. The entire basin shook. Rock walls collapsed. Mages flew. I anchored myself with gravity well and grabbed Evelyn before she disappeared into another zip code. Jonah landed nearby. Serena appeared above us. She said normal magic was feeding it. I had already figured that out. Then I smiled. She saw my face. She said no. I had not said anything. Again, people were getting disturbingly good at predicting me. The creature absorbed spells. So did I. The difference was what happened afterward. If I could take its absorption spell, I might be able to steal the conversion technique and stop it from feeding. Problem? The absorption field surrounded the monster. I needed contact. Evelyn immediately said no. Jonah also said no. Marcus arrived just in time to join the no. Serena looked at the creature, then at me. She asked what my plan was. I loved her, I explained. The outer shell absorbed direct magic. Physical matter could still touch it. so I would reach the shell using movement spells without attacking. Then I would absorb the active field through contact. Simple. Marcus asked about the part where the creature was the size of a stadium and capable of erasing mountains. I said I was still developing that section. The meteor beast lifted 2 limbs. Gravity distorted. That was my cue. I vector shifted forward. Repulse launched me. Step fold jumped me across the field. I crossed a mile in seconds. The creature noticed. A limb slammed down. I used distance fold to shorten the space beside me. The limb missed by inches and hit the ground hard enough to create a canyon. I ran up its surface. Meteor stone burned under my boots. The absorption field pulled at every active spell on my body. Crystal hide weakened. Night carapace flickered. My movement magic started draining. I canceled all defenses. Bad feeling. Very bad. I reached the central shell. The field intensified. It pulled at my core. For the first time, something tried to take magic out of me. My stored spells shook. Fireball, lightning, azure fangs, spatial severance. Hundreds of structures. The meteor beast wanted them as fuel. I refused, not with strength, with organization. My core was empty space. The spells were not one big pool of mana. They were separate preserved structures. I scattered them, spread them across the emptiness, created distance between each pattern. The creature's field pulled. It could not grab everything at once. Then I placed both hands on its shell. My core opened. The absorption field flowed toward me. 2 thieves grabbed the same bag. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then I did something stupid. I cast Sun Eater Flame inside the contact point. The creature absorbed it. The black fire began, eating the creature's absorption field from within. The field weakened. I pulled. The magical structure tore loose. Meteor devour stored. The creature's outer cracks dimmed. I nearly celebrated. Then it hit me with a limb. No spell, just several thousand tons of rock. I became a projectile. I flew across the basin, past Jonah, past Evelyn, past Marcus. Serena folded space in front of me, so I traveled through a loop and came back. That was very helpful. It was also extremely disorienting. I returned from the opposite direction and slammed into the creature again. Accidentally perfect. This time I activated Meteor Devour. The field spread from my body. The creature fired a beam. I absorbed the raw magical output before it completed. No. Meteor Devour could absorb energy, but my core still only stored completed spell structures permanently. The excess raw energy flooded the temporary field. I needed somewhere to put it. So I fed it into kinetic storage. Bad idea. Kinetic storage accepted force, not raw magic. The structure shook. I redirected the energy into Pocket Star. Worse idea. The tiny artificial sun above my hand grew from the size of a marble to the size of a carriage. Everyone in the basin saw it. Marcus shouted my name from very far away. I agreed with his tone. I had too much energy. The creature kept feeding me because our absorption fields were linked. If I released the Pocket Star normally, I would erase half the basin. So I changed the direction. Vector shift. Up became down for the star. Then distance fold. The sky became close. Then repulse. I launched the Pocket Star straight upward. It disappeared into the clouds. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the night side of the sky became day. A ring of light expanded above us. The shockwave arrived later and flattened every remaining tent in the basin. No one was hurt. Many lunches were lost. The meteor creature staggered. Stored energy was gone. Now everyone could attack physically. That is what they did. Metal mages dropped unenchanted slabs. Earth mages lifted boulders using magic, then released the spells before impact. Enhanced fighters attacked with momentum. Serena folded falling rocks closer without touching the creature with magical output. Marcus heated the air beside stone projectiles, but stopped the spell before they reached the shell, turning them into red-hot physical meteors. Evelyn did something clever. She created lightning far above, magnetized chunks of metal, canceled her magic, then let gravity do the rest. Jonah formed Azure Fang around a giant boulder, cut it into dozens of pieces, then canceled the flame before the pieces struck. I climbed back onto the creature. It tried to regenerate its absorption field. I stole the variation. Then I used zero-distance crush on the stone beside its central core. Not the core itself. The spell would be absorbed. Instead, I compressed the physical shell inward. The The magic ended before the crushed rock touched the core. Physical fragments slammed into it. The central light flickered. The meteor beast collapsed. Its enormous limbs crashed into the basin. The floating core dropped into a crater. Silence followed, then the core cracked. Inside was not flesh, not a monster. Just a dense knot of ancient magical crystal, pulsing slowly. Serena inspected it. She said the organism was dormant again, not dead. It might sleep another 100 years. I asked whether I could touch it. 4 people said no at the same time. I did not touch it. Growth. The grand convergence ended early. Mostly because the basin had become less of a basin and more of a collection of craters inside a larger crater. No one blamed me for the original awakening. They did blame me for the artificial sun flare. My father found me the next morning. I was sitting on a broken ridge eating soup from the cookbook I had bought months earlier. Excellent soup. He stood behind me for a while. Then he said he had been wrong, simple words. Years late, I kept eating. He said he had judged my worth by the one thing I lacked. Mana, he had believed our bloodline's value came from preserving Azure Fang. Then he had watched me use Azure Fang beside lightning, gravity, spatial magic, black flame, crystal, and techniques from families he considered legendary. He understood now that my emptiness had never been a defect. I looked at him. I had imagined this apology so many times. In some versions I shouted. In others I forgave him instantly. Reality was quieter. I told him I appreciated the apology. Then I said I was not coming back. His face tightened. I did not say it to hurt him. I simply no longer wanted the life I had spent years begging to enter. My room at Arcadia was small. Marcus shouted too much. Evelyn electrocuted me for research. Serena considered near-death a warm-up. Jonah and I were still figuring out how to be brothers instead of measurements. It was messy. It was mine. My father nodded. Then he sat down and asked if there was more soup. I gave him some. That was enough for now. I thought the grand convergence would be the peak of my year. It was not, because once I had absorbed Meteor Devour, I gained something I had never possessed before. Way to temporarily hold raw magical energy. My core still could not generate mana. That never changed. But Meteor Devour could catch ambient energy, attacks, and magical radiation before they became stored spell patterns. Temporary fuel, which meant I could overcharge spells beyond the power of their original casters. That was dangerous. So naturally I tested it immediately. I stood on an empty plateau with Marcus, Evelyn, and Serena. Jonah had gone home for family training, but promised to return later. Serena created a controlled field of raw spatial energy. I absorbed it through Meteor Devour. The temporary energy gathered around my stored spells. I chose Ember Sphere. My first spell, the little monster fireball that had changed my life. I fed it the captured spatial energy. The red sphere above my palm grew. 10 feet, 20, 50. It became a miniature blazing moon. Marcus asked whether I remembered this was supposed to be a small test. I told him yes. Serena started laughing. Evelyn backed away, smart. I compressed the sphere using zero-distance crush. 50 feet became 10. 10 became 3. The fire turned white. I wrapped spatial severance around the surface to keep it contained. Then gravity well, then thunder choir for impact resonance. I looked at the result. A 3-foot white star surrounded by distorted space and silent lightning. My first spell had become a catastrophe. I threw it at a distant mountain. The sphere vanished into the rock. Nothing happened. Marcus relaxed. Then the top third of the mountain lifted into the air, perfectly intact. For one impossible second, it floated. Then it dissolved into glowing dust. The sound arrived last. A deep boom rolled across the plateau. Evelyn stared. Serena stared. Marcus slowly turned toward me. I said, Ember Sphere. He said that was not an Ember Sphere. I said it was emotionally an Ember Sphere. He walked away. I named it First Light. That became my signature technique. Not inherited, not stolen from one bloodline, built from everything I had learned. The weakest spell I had ever absorbed, rebuilt until it could erase a mountain. That felt right. And for the first time since discovering my power, I stopped asking what spell I could steal next. I started asking a better question. What could I create from all of them? Creating spells turned out to be more dangerous than stealing them. When I stole a spell, at least someone had used it before. There was history, technique. Proof that it did not immediately create a new crater. When I combined spells, proof disappeared. My notebook became less like magical research and more like a list of questions nobody responsible had asked. What happens if I put a spatial severance edge around a gravity sphere? Answer: the sphere cuts whatever tries to escape. What happens if I put eternal ember inside an ice shell? Answer: the shell repeatedly melts and freezes, creating an endless burst of steam pressure. What happens if I combine ninefold misfortune with a bouncing light orb? Answer: everyone near the orb suddenly has a terrible afternoon. I stopped that test after Marcus stepped on the same rake twice. He accused me of placing the rake. I had not. That made it funnier. My most useful invention started as a joke. I layered Miner's Shield, Crystal Hide, Knight Carapace, Silver Fortress, and Anchor Point around a tiny floating sphere, 5 defensive spells. And I put Repulse inside. The result was a small, indestructible-looking ball that violently refused to stay near anything. I called it personal space. If an enemy got too close, I released it. The sphere bounced around the battlefield, knocking everything away. Evelyn hated the name. She hated the spell more when I released 12 at once and turned our practice arena into a magical pinball machine. She spent 3 minutes dodging. Then one ball hit another. Both changed direction. One hit me. I flew into Marcus. Marcus banned personal space. I made smaller versions. He banned those too. Serena encouraged me. This is why Marcus had more gray hair. For 2 months I focused on control. That sounds boring. It was not. Control meant learning how many spells I could cast simultaneously before my brain became soup. At first 8, then 12, then 20. I created mental groups: defense, movement, control, attack, recovery, absorption. Each group could run almost automatically because I knew the spell structures so deeply. Crystal Hide could trigger when impact approached. Eternal Ember ran constantly. Restoration Pulse activated only for major damage. Anchor Point engaged when gravity changed unexpectedly. Heat Sink responded to dangerous temperature. Meteor Devour opened when raw magic exceeded a threshold I could safely absorb. I turned my body into an orchestra of stolen magic. No system. No invisible voice. No convenient interface. Just years of study, a terrifying memory, and enough bad experiences to know what needed to happen before I hit another wall. Marcus tested me with surprise attacks. At breakfast, a wind blade came through the door shield. During a walk, the ground shifted. Anchor. While I slept, a harmless light bolt hit my blanket. I absorbed it without waking. The next morning, I threw Marcus's breakfast into the ceiling with vector shift. Training should be mutual. Evelyn's lightning became stronger too. She had learned from watching my combinations. Her original lightning core could not use other elements directly, but she started shaping lightning through pressure, magnetism, heat, and movement principles she copied from my explanations. She created a lightning step so fast she seemed to vanish. Then she hit me in the back of the head before I could turn. I congratulated her. Then I stole the improved lightning step. She called me unbearable. I used it to steal her lunch. Our partnership remained healthy. Jonah returned to Arcadia several weeks later. He had changed too, not just stronger. Quieter in a better way. He no longer introduced himself through our family technique. He had started modifying Azure Fang into his own style. Shorter blades, closer combat, less wasted fire, he asked to train. So we fought every morning. Sometimes he won, not often. I am still telling this recap, so I control how much detail goes into those mornings. The important part is he improved. My family also changed. They did not suddenly become perfect. That would have been ridiculous. Some relatives still looked uncomfortable around me. A few became too friendly, which was worse. My father visited Arcadia twice. He never asked me to return home again. He watched training. He brought food. We talked like two people trying to build a bridge over a canyon one stone at a time. That was enough. I had bigger problems, specifically dragons. Arcadia received reports that a volcanic dragon had nested in an abandoned obsidian range. It was not attacking cities. It was not secretly planning world domination. It simply existed in a place monster hunters wanted to cross. Serena was asked to inspect the region because the creature's magical pressure had begun waking smaller monsters. I volunteered before she finished explaining. Marcus refused. Serena accepted. Marcus asked why he was still part of these conversations. Because we enjoyed the expression on his face. The dragon was enormous. Its wings looked like torn mountains. Black scales covered its body, Orange light glowed between them. It slept inside a valley full of melted glass. I looked at the glass. Then at Serena. She asked whether I still wanted to get hit. I said yes, less confidently. We did not attack first. Serena approached the edge of the valley and released a harmless flare. The dragon opened one eye. That eye was larger than my bedroom. It looked at us, then it closed the eye, rude. I fired a light orb at the ground beside it. The dragon ignored me. I fired a larger one, ignored. I used Thunderchoir to amplify my voice and asked whether legendary dragons normally slept through challenges. The eye opened. Success. Serena told me my survival instincts had become performance art. The dragon stood. The valley shook. It stretched its wings. Then it breathed fire, not a fireball, not a lance. A river of white-orange flame filled the entire valley. Serena folded herself away. I stayed, obviously. I activated Heatsink, Crystal Hide, Night Carapace, Silver Fortress. Sun Eater flame around the outside to consume part of the breath. Meteor Devour opened over everything. The dragon fire hit. My world became heat. Silver Fortress melted. Night Carapace burned. Crystal Hide turned red. Sun Eater flame ate for half a second, then the dragon breath overwhelmed it. Meteor Devour caught the raw overflow. My core searched for a complete spell structure inside the breath. There, deep in the flame, a pattern shaped like a spiral wrapped around a furnace. I pulled. The dragon pushed more fire. My boots melted. Eternal Ember struggled. Restoration Pulse flashed. My hair burned again. I was developing a complicated relationship with hair. I pulled harder. The furnace-shaped spell entered my core. Cataclysm breath stored. I stepped folded out of the stream. The fire continued for another mile and turned a cliff into liquid stone. I lay face down behind a ridge. Serena appeared beside me. She asked if I had it. I raised one thumb. My sleeve disintegrated. She laughed. The dragon stopped breathing fire, then it sniffed. It sensed its own spell inside me. For the first time, it looked interested. I stood. Regeneration repaired my skin. New clothing did not regenerate. Unfortunate. I aimed toward an empty mountain and cast Cataclysm breath. A white-orange beam erupted from my hand. I had expected a cone. I accidentally compressed it. The beam punched through the mountain, not into, through. A circular tunnel appeared from one side to the other. The dragon stared. I stared. Serena stared. Then the dragon did something I had not expected. It lowered its head, not submission, more like curiosity. I walked closer. Serena let me, which proved she was not qualified to supervise me. The dragon released a low rumble. I used my stored sonic translation tricks to analyze the vibration. Not language exactly, emotion, challenge. It wanted to see more, so I gave it more. Pocket stars, spatial severance, zero distance crush, azure fang wrapped in lightning. The dragon responded to each with its own spell, molten wing. Obsidian rain, roaring pressure, volcanic armor. I absorbed everyone I could survive. For 2 hours, we traded magic across an empty mountain range, like two children comparing toys, capable of altering geography. At one point, the dragon threw a lake of lava at me. I used vector shift. The lava fell sideways, then upward. Then I froze it with absolute frost. A black glass wave hung in the sky. I sliced it into cubes with spatial severance, then used repulse to launch the cubes back. The dragon smashed them with one wing. Serena sat on a boulder and watched. She had stopped pretending this was an inspection. By sunset, the dragon was tired. So was I. I had gained 9 high-level techniques and one important lesson. There were magical creatures in the world, stronger than entire academies. I had been climbing a tower without realizing how tall the sky was. That excited me. When we returned, Marcus asked if the inspection had gone smoothly. Serena said yes. I said I had learned dragon breath. Marcus walked away without asking for details. He was adapting. My next target was not a monster. It was Serena. She had been the strongest mage I knew since the day she launched me into a wall with 2 fingers. I had collected several of her spells. I had survived zero distance crush. But we had never fought seriously, so I challenged her. She accepted before Marcus could object. The entire academy heard within an hour. Students filled the observation platforms. Instructors came. Traveling masters stayed an extra day. Jonah stood near the front. My father happened to be visiting. Evelyn claimed the best seat by threatening to electrify anyone who took it. Marcus stood inside the arena as referee. He looked at both of us. Then he changed his mind and moved outside the arena. Wise Serena faced me across the largest practice field. No weapon. No dramatic stance. She simply stood with one hand in her coat pocket. That annoyed me. I activated 20 defensive structures at once. Crystal spread over my arms. Night carapace darkened my shoulders. Gravity stabilized beneath my feet. Eternal ember brightened under my skin. Meteor devour waited. I launched first, lightning step. One moment I was 50 feet away. The next my fist was inches from her face. Serena folded distance. My fist passed her and hit the ground 50 feet behind. I turned mid-strike with vector shift. She compressed the space around my ankle. I cut the compression with spatial severance. She smiled. The arena disappeared, not literally. Space folded into layers. I saw Serena in front of me, behind me, above, far away. Right beside me, she had turned one battlefield into overlapping distances. I threw Azure Fang. The blade traveled forward, vanished, and came back at me from the left. I absorbed my own spell automatically. No new copy. Rude. I used Compass Break. Direction became uncertain. Serena's folded battlefield wavered for half a second. That was enough. I spread magnetic pull through the metal dust beneath the arena, not to attack her, but to map where the particles actually were. Magic could fold sight. It could fold distance. But the magnetic relationships gave me another reference. I found her cataclysm breath. She folded it upward. The beam hit the sky. I used the beam as a marker. Lightning step followed my own magical trail. I appeared above her, meteor knuckle. She caught my fist with 2 fingers. I expected the impact to break the arena. Nothing happened. She had folded the momentum away. The stored force reappeared 300 feet behind me and demolished a wall. Marcus shouted from a safe distance. I apologized. Serena twisted my wrist. Space rotated with it. The world flipped. I hit the ground even though I had been falling upward. She pressed one foot onto my crystal hide. Compression formed. I used Meteor Devour. Her spell started feeding energy into me. She changed frequencies. The absorption slipped. I used Sun Eater Flame. She folded the fire back inside my own shield. I canceled it. She compressed the shield. It broke. I grinned. This was incredible. Every trick I used, she answered. Every spell I combined, she understood before it finished. I finally saw what decades of real combat experience looked like. I could own 1,000 techniques. Serena knew exactly when 1 inch mattered more than 1,000 spells. So I stopped trying to overpower her. I started lying, not with words. With magic, I created phantom fog. She folded it away, expected. Inside the fog, I left light orbs. She saw them, expected. Each light orb carried anchor point. When she folded space around the arena again, the anchored lights resisted. Tiny distortions appeared. I mapped those distortions with magnetic pull. Now I could see the shape of her folds. I fired Gregory. She sliced him with compression. Poor Gregory. But every stone fragment carried kinetic storage. The pieces hit walls and stored impact. I pulled them back with gravity. She redirected them. Each redirect added more force. I let her. Again. The battlefield filled with harmless-looking crystal gravel. Serena noticed. Too late, I activated every stored kinetic charge simultaneously, not at her. Outward, thousands of tiny force bursts disrupted the folded space. Her battlefield unraveled. For 1 second, every path became normal. I used that second. Step fold. Lightning step, vector shift, repulse, distance fold, 5 movement spells at once. I crossed the arena faster than sound. Serena raised a compression wall. I did not break it. I used 9-fold misfortune on the ground beneath her. The stone cracked at an inconvenient angle. Her foot shifted 1/2 inch. That was all. I passed the compression wall at its weakest point. My palm touched her shoulder. I used silence mark, then gravity well, then binding thread. Then Silver Fortress formed around the ground, not her body, creating a metal cage outside direct contact. She could still break all of it. I knew that. So I used the one technique she had not seen, First Light, a tiny version. The white star appeared above my fingertip, 1 inch from her shoulder. Compressed fire. Gravity, spatial edge. Resonance. Enough power to destroy the arena if fully released. Serena stopped. I stopped. We stood there, then she smiled. She tapped my forehead. Distance fold activated. I teleported backward and fell out of bounds. I landed on my back. The audience froze. Marcus looked at the boundary. Then at Serena, then at me. Technically, I had crossed out first. I lost. I stared at the sky. Then I laughed. Serena walked over and offered her hand. I took it. She said I had almost won. I told her almost was a cruel word. She said good. It would keep me training. That duel did more for me than another 100 easy victories. I had climbed above almost every student, above most instructors, above specialists who had mocked 0 mana. But there was still someone better, not because she had more spells. Because she used one perfect answer at the right time, so I trained smarter. I stopped measuring growth by collection size, 300 spells, 400. Number mattered less. I began refining sequences. I created false combinations designed to bait counters. I learned to cancel spells before completion, so enemies reacted to attacks that never came. I learned to hide a curse inside a harmless light effect. I learned to use healing offensively by overcharging an opponent's natural recovery until their muscles became too relaxed to move properly. That one was weird. Marcus told me never to explain it to first years. I learned to use rot touch on summoned terrain without aiming at people. I learned to make silence mark travel inside sound. Yes. Silence spell hidden in sound. It made no sense emotionally. Magically, it was beautiful. I learned to combine dragon roar with thunder choir and compressed air. I tested it in an empty canyon. Every bird left. Some may still be flying. Months passed. I turned 17. Arcadia held no ceremony for me. Thank goodness, Evelyn gave me a small metal ring, not romantic. It was a grounding ring designed to stop me from accidentally discharging lightning through door handles. Very thoughtful. Jonah gave me a new coat reinforced with heat-resistant thread, also thoughtful. Marcus gave me a training schedule, less thoughtful. Serena gave me a map. The map showed places beyond Arcadia where rare magic existed. A glacier where living ice storms wandered, a desert where sound became solid. A canyon full of magnetic lightning, a forest where gravity changed every sunset. A coastline haunted by a curse that made waves climb into the sky. I want to leave immediately. Then the academy alarm rang, not a drill. Not a monster in the basement, not another unlucky staircase. Every tower bell sounded at once. I looked outside. The northern sky was black, not cloudy, black. A massive shape moved inside the darkness. At first, I thought it was another dragon. Then I saw wings, too many. 6 wings stretched across the horizon. Body covered in pale scales, a long tail wrapped in storm clouds. At its center glowed a red crystal embedded in its chest. Serena looked at it once. Her expression changed. She knew what it was. Riftworm, an ancient migratory monster that traveled along unstable magical currents. It did not care about cities. It did not care about people. It followed mana. Arcadia sat on one of the largest natural mana wells in the region. The worm was heading directly toward it, again, not because of me. The academy had been built on that mana well centuries earlier. I merely had terrible timing. The worm crossed miles with each wing beat. Every flap created spatial turbulence. Towers shook before it even arrived. Students evacuated toward underground shelters. Instructors raised defensive barriers. Marcus organized the combat grounds. Evelyn stood beside me. Jonah appeared from another tower. My father and several relatives were still at Arcadia for a family training visit. They joined the defensive line with the other experienced mages. Serena looked at me. I knew what she was going to say. Do not try to absorb everything. I told her I had grown. She said that answer did not reassure her. The rift worm screamed. The sound tore open 3 spatial fractures in the sky. One fracture released black wind. Another dropped chunks of frozen stone. The third bent light until the entire northern horizon twisted. This creature did not use one element. It had traveled through magical currents for centuries, accumulating strange effects in its body, not like me. It was not copying spells. Its biology had adapted to unstable mana until every movement caused magical disasters. That meant its attacks had complete structures. I smiled. Evelyn said no. Too late, the worm reached the outer barrier. Hundreds of mages attacked. Serena ordered them to target the wings physically and avoid feeding the red chest crystal fire. Lightning, ice, force. The sky became color. The worm twisted. Spatial currents redirected half the attacks. The rest hit its scales and exploded. It barely slowed. Then the red chest crystal flashed. A pulse of force hit Arcadia. The outer barrier shattered. Windows broke across 3 towers. I activated Silver Fortress around a group of students and anchored the metal to the ground. The pulse passed. I looked up. The worm's chest crystal was charging again. Serena folded the next pulse sideways. The force reappeared over an empty forest and flattened trees for miles. She could protect us, not forever. The worm was too large. Too much power. Its goal was the mana well beneath Arcadia. If it landed on the central grounds and started feeding, the entire magical foundation could collapse. Floating towers would fall, pocket spaces could rupture, the sky vault might tear open. We needed to drive it away before it reached the center. Normal attacks were not enough. I started building a plan, not one spell, a battlefield. First, movement. The worm was using spatial turbulence around its wings to redirect attacks. I knew spatial magic, not its exact version, yet. I launched myself into the air. Serena saw me go. She swore. I had never heard her swear before. Milestone. I lightning stepped through falling debris. Vector shift turned a downward collapse into forward momentum. Repulse fired beneath my feet. The worm flapped. A warped wave of space hit me. My defenses bent. My core caught the structure. Rift currents stored. I nearly lost control. The spell did not cut space like spatial severance or fold it like Serena. It created moving channels where distance continuously changed. A river made from location. Ridiculous. I cast it beneath myself. The sky stretched. I crossed half a mile in one step. Then overshot the worm. I appeared behind its tail. Fine. Learning curve. The tail swung. I used anchor point. Bad choice. A creature weighing more than a fortress did not care that I was anchored. The tail hit. My anchor held. The rest of me objected. Crystal hide exploded. I spun through the air. Eternal ember repaired cracks. I opened rift current again and surfed the spatial wake back toward the creature. This time I controlled it. I landed on one wing. The pale scales were each larger than a shield. Magical current raced between them. I placed my hand down. The worm reacted instantly. Lightning erupted from its scales. Not Evelyn's lightning. This was violet and cold. It did not burn. It erased sensation. My arm went numb. My core swallowed the spell. Nerve frost lightning stored. The worm rolled. I gravity anchored myself to the wing. It generated a pressure wave. Stored. It released a disorientation field. Stored. It bent light. Stored. For 10 glorious seconds, the monster tried to remove me using increasingly rare magic. I became harder to remove with every attempt. Then it changed strategy. It stopped using magic. The worm folded its wing against its body. I saw the pale scales closing around me like a mountain-sized trap. I used spatial severance to cut an escape line. The scales resisted. I added Sun Eater Flame to consume their magical reinforcement. A gap opened. I rift stepped through it. The wing slammed shut behind me. I landed on the creature's back. Below, Arcadia looked tiny. The defensive lines were firing again. Serena redirected shots around me. Jonah's azure fang carved at one wing joint. My father and the family joined him, dozens of blue arcs striking together. The worm barely noticed. I needed the chest. The red crystal was gathering mana from the academy, well, even before landing. It had extended invisible absorption threads through the air. Meteor Devour sensed them. I followed the flow. Then I understood the real danger. The crystal was not simply eating mana. It was compressing it. Every second, pressure increased inside the worm's chest. If we drove it away carelessly, it could release that energy over Arcadia. We needed to drain it first. There was exactly one person nearby, with a spell designed to absorb raw magical energy. Unfortunately, that person was me. I ran down the worm's back. It twisted. I ran sideways. Gravity lost meaning around the wings, so I used vector shift to decide my own down. I crossed its shoulder. The chest crystal came into view. Red light blazed beneath translucent scales. I jumped. The worm screamed. Rift current exploded around me. I opened my own. The two spatial rivers collided. The sky folded into spirals. For 1 second I saw Arcadia above me, below me, beside me, and somehow very far away. Then I pushed through. My hands hit the crystal. Raw mana flooded me. Meteor Devour opened automatically. Too much, far too much. The Grand Convergence creature had stored energy from thousands of spells. This crystal was pulling from a natural mana well that had fed Arcadia for centuries. My temporary storage filled instantly. I redirected into Pocket Star. The star formed above my shoulder. It grew. I compressed it. More mana arrived. I fed Silver Fortress. Metal across the Academy grounds rose into the air. Too dangerous. I cancelled it. I fed Crystal Hide. Crystal armor expanded over my entire body, then began growing outward like a giant statue. Still too much. I fed Gregory. This deserves detail. Stone Serpent was one of the simplest spells I had stolen. Normally, Gregory was 30 feet long. I poured raw mana into him. The ground below Arcadia moved. Stone Serpent the size of a train erupted from the mountainside, then grew, and grew. And grew. By the time I stopped feeding it, Gregory was wrapped around 3 Academy towers. Students in the shelters could see his crystal head through windows. Evelyn later told me everyone cheered. I was busy being electrocuted by a flying apocalypse. The worm tried to pull away. Gregory launched upward. The giant stone serpent coiled around one of its legs. The worm flapped. Gregory anchored to the mountain. The entire academy shook. Marcus looked at the serpent. Then at the sky. I am certain part of him was proud. The larger part was calculating repair costs. The chest crystal kept feeding me. I needed more outlets, so I began activating spells. Dozens. Not random, every technique had a purpose. Absolute Frost cooled the crystal. Sun Eater Flame consumed unstable overflow. Gravity Well compressed loose energy. Thunder Choir turned dangerous vibration into directed sound. Silver Fortress formed floating braces around Gregory. Diamond Bloom reinforced those braces. Black Step moved stress fractures away from weak points. Restoration Pulse repaired my body. Eternal Ember handled continuous damage. Night Carapace filtered cursed radiation. Heat Sink controlled temperature. Meteor Devour kept pulling. Rift Current stabilized space. Anchor Point locked me to the crystal. My entire core lit up. Hundreds of spell structures rotated in the emptiness. From the ground, people could see them appearing around me. Blue Azure Fangs, White Frost Rings, Black Sun Eater Flame. Golden Restoration Light, Silver Metal Halos, Crystal Petals, Violet Lightning. Gravity Spheres, Shadow Ribbons, Spatial Lines, Sound Waves bending dust. Signature techniques from bloodlines across the world, not one after another. At the same time, my father stood below with our relatives. For generations, our family had treated Azure Fang like proof that one inherited spell defined their worth. Now Azure Fang was one blade in a storm of legendary magic around the sun they had discarded for having nothing. I did not see my father's face at that moment. Jonah told me later. He said our father laughed, not because it was funny, because the situation had become too ridiculous for any other response. I like that, the worm roared. The chest crystal dimmed slightly. Good. We were draining it. Then the monster folded all 6 wings inward. Serena shouted. She recognized the pattern. The worm was preparing a migration jump. It would tear open a massive spatial channel and escape along the mana current. Normally good, except I was attached to its chest. Gregory was attached to its leg. And the spatial jump would rip through Arcadia's central mana well on the way out. Bad, very bad. The sky split. A dark line opened above the worm. I had seconds. I could let go, save myself. The worm would jump. Arcadia might collapse. Or I could stop a creature the size of a mountain from teleporting. Ridiculous. Good. I released the chest crystal. Meteor Devour stayed linked through a narrow thread. Then I cast Anchor Point on the worm. The spell covered 1 scale. Not enough. I cast it again, and again. 20 anchors, 50, 100. The worm continued rising. I fed raw mana from the chest crystal into the anchors. Golden geometric points appeared across its body. The creature became tied to local space. The migration rift pulled. The anchors strained. Mountains cracked below, still not enough. I used gravity well, maximum. The worm dropped 10 feet, then rose again. I added vector shift. For the worm, down became down harder. That is not technical language. It is accurate. Serena joined me. She folded the distance between the worm and the ground to nearly zero, making escape spatially difficult. The migration rift fought her. Blood ran from her nose. I had never seen Serena strain that hard. Evelyn understood next. Lightning chains shot upward, not to damage the worm. She magnetized metal anchors across the academy grounds and tied them to conductive braces around Gregory. Jonah added Azure Fang. He cut falling debris before it could hit the structures. Marcus created walls of controlled flame to redirect panic-driven monsters away from the campus. My father and the family joined Jonah. Everyone had a job. Mine was stupidest. I looked at the migration rift, a completed spatial spell. Enormous, powerful enough to move a mountain-sized creature across hundreds of miles. And it was touching me through the worm's body. My core opened. I tried to absorb it. Pain hit instantly. The spell was too large. Not strong, large. Its structure extended across the entire creature and the rift above. My core could store the pattern, but I could not pull the whole thing through one contact point quickly enough. So I changed the shape of my absorption. Meteor Devour spread over the worm's scales. Rift current followed. Then I used distance fold on myself. Not to move, to make every anchor point temporarily adjacent to my core. Hundreds of contact points became one. The migration spell touched me everywhere at once. My vision went white. The structure flooded in layers, coordinates, momentum. Spatial memory, it was not a teleport spell. It was a route. Worm carried instinctive pathways through magical currents, and this spell opened one. My empty core shook. For the first time since my power awakened, I wondered if empty could still be too small. Then I remembered something. My core was not a container with walls. That was how everyone imagined monocores, a sphere, a reservoir. Mine had never been a reservoir. It was absence. The more spells I stored, the emptiness did not shrink. They floated inside it. There was always space between, always room for one more pattern. I pulled. The migration rift collapsed. The black line in the sky snapped shut. A new spell entered my core. World strides, stored. The worm dropped. Everyone below screamed. A mountain-sized creature was now falling toward Arcadia. I had solved one problem and created a more immediate one. Classic. Serena was exhausted from resisting the rift. Evelyn's lightning anchors were breaking. Gregory cracked. I had 3 seconds. I activated World Stride. I did not understand it fully. Terrible time to experiment. Perfect time to learn. The spell wanted a route. A destination connected through ambient magical currents. I sensed them. Lines across the world, mana rivers, storm paths, volcanic channels. Arcadia is well connected to dozens. I chose the largest empty location I knew. Basin still cratered, still uninhabited, still extremely tolerant of bad decisions. I placed one hand on the worm, then cast World Stride. Space opened. Not a portal. The world stretched into a glowing road. Arcadia disappeared beneath us. The worm fell through a corridor of stars, storms, mountains, and impossible distance. For half a second, I saw places I had never visited. A frozen sea glowing under green light, a desert with floating stone arches. A black forest beneath 2 moons, a mountain range surrounded by permanent lightning. Then the route ended. The worm and I appeared above the basin. We were still falling. I had forgotten that part. I vector shifted myself sideways. The worm hit the basin. The impact created a crater inside the crater inside the crater. At this point, calling it the basin felt stubborn. Dust rose miles into the sky. I landed on a ridge. The worm lay in the center, alive, barely moving. Its chest crystal was almost empty. Its 6 wings spread across shattered stone. I should have been terrified. Instead, I was exhausted. I walked down the ridge. The worm lifted its head. We stared at each other. It opened its mouth. I raised one finger. First light formed, tiny, white. Compressed, the worm stopped. Good choice. I did not want to kill it. It had not attacked Arcadia out of hatred. It had followed Mana. Dangerous did not always mean evil, so I gave it another option. I used World Stride. A glowing route opened toward the volcanic wilderness where the dragon lived. Huge monocurrents, no cities, no academy, plenty of space. The worm looked at the root, then at me. I pointed. It gave a low rumble, maybe gratitude, maybe an insult. Hard to know, the creature crawled into the glowing path, its wings folded. The root closed behind it. The basin became quiet. I sat down. For the first time all day, nothing was trying to destroy me. Then WorldStride activated accidentally under my left foot because I was exhausted. I fell through a glowing line and reappeared 10 feet behind myself, face first. I decided to stay down. Arcadia celebrated for 3 days. I slept through most of the first one. When I woke, my room was full of food, some from students, some from instructors. One bowl of soup from my father, no note, did not need one. The academy had survived. The central Manhwa well was damaged but stable. 2 floating towers had shifted positions. One was now slightly sideways. Marcus claimed that was not my fault. I considered that personal growth for both of us. Gregory remained enormous for several hours before the extra mana faded. Students climbed him like a monument. I allowed it. He had earned respect. Then the stored excess dissipated, and Gregory returned to normal size. I kept a small crystal scale from the giant version. Evelyn said that was sentimental. I said it was geological documentation. She did not believe me. Jonah found me on the roof the next evening. He sat beside me. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said something I had waited years to hear, not an apology. Not praise. He said he wanted to learn one of my Azure Fang modifications. That mattered more. He was no longer protecting the spell from me. He was asking me to teach him, so I did. I showed him how to split the edge into curved branches without losing heat density. He struggled. I laughed. He threw a small blue flame at me. I absorbed it automatically. We both laughed. That was the first time we felt like actual brothers. My father watched from below but did not interrupt. Good decision. My reputation after the riftworm became absurd. Students I had never met bowed when I passed. I told them to stop. Some bowed lower. I started using vector shift to walk on walls so people could not block hallways around me. That made rumors worse. A first year asked whether I had become the strongest mage in Arcadia. I pointed toward Serena. She was standing on a distant tower eating an apple. The first year asked whether I could beat her now. I said probably. Serena threw the apple. Distance folded. It hit me in the forehead from half a mile away. I changed my answer to maybe. Marcus promoted me into advanced combat training. Not as an instructor. He said giving me official responsibility over younger students would be reckless. Correct, but he let me demonstrate strategy. My first lesson was simple. I stood in front of a group of students. Most had heard the stories. 0 mana, spell eater. Dragon breath, riftworm. They expected some profound speech. I told them magic was not a personality. A fire mage did not need to solve every problem with bigger fire. A lightning mage did not need to move straight. A weak core did not mean a weak mind. A strong bloodline did not mean strong judgment. Then I demonstrated by using a bread rising spell to defeat a training slime. The slime inflated, got stuck. The class stared. I told them that was strategy. Marcus walked away, again. Evelyn later admitted it was memorable. That was enough. I also started returning to the Sky Vault, not to collect. To create, I carved a private training circle into one reinforced chamber. Then I practiced WorldStride. At first, I could only follow major mana currents. Arcadia to the basin, basin to volcanic range to Storm Canyon. Long routes, then I learned to create short branches, across a room. Across a tower, across the academy. It was not instant teleportation. It was more like opening a road where distance became optional. I combined it with lightning step. That was a mistake. I crossed the academy 12 times in 1 second and threw up in a flower pot. Nobody saw it except Evelyn. She will never let me forget. I combined WorldStride with Stone Serpent. Gregory could enter the ground in one location and emerge miles away. Excellent. I combined it with Cataclysm Breath. Terrifying. I could fire Dragon Breath into a root and make it emerge from another direction. Serena watched that test. Then she asked me to fire from behind her. I did. She folded the root. The breath came back toward me. I absorbed it. We both laughed. Our rematch was inevitable. Not yet. I wanted to understand more first. 3 weeks after the worm attack, Serena brought me to the highest Arcadia tower before sunrise. She had the map she gave me on my birthday. She spread it across the roof. Then she marked a location far beyond the regions I knew, across an ocean. Past the mapped academy routes, a place where permanent magical storms had existed for centuries. No academy controlled it. No family claimed it. No city stood nearby. Travelers called it the Dead Sky because spells cast inside did strange things to distance, weight, heat, and time. Time, that word caught me. I had no time magic, none. Not even a weak variation. Serena said she had been there once. She lasted 4 minutes. I stared at her. The strongest mage I knew, 4 minutes. She explained that the storms were not attacking people intentionally. They were natural magical phenomena. Old, dense, unpredictable. Some strikes aged stone. Some froze motion for a fraction of a second. Some made gravity pulse in circles. Some created light before the source existed. I felt my smile growing. Serena closed the map. Not yet. She said Worldstride might be able to reach it eventually, but I needed a stable route. The rift worm had shown me something important. Magical currents connected farther than known roads. If I learned to read them, I could travel to places no ordinary portal reached. I asked when we could leave. She said when I could beat her. I laughed. There it was. A goal, simple, beautiful, dangerous. I trained for the rematch, harder than ever. I refined first light into multiple sizes. Needle-sized for precision, fist-sized for combat, mountain-sized remained strongly discouraged. I created a non-lethal version of zero-distance crush that compressed movement instead of bodies. I called it Sit Down. Evelyn hated that name. I used it on her. She sat down. She hated it more. I rebuilt Gregory with modular spells, Crystal for armor, Thunder Choir for roar, Sun Eater Flame for enchanted barriers, Rift Current for movement. He became less like a spell and more like an extremely complicated pet rock. I created 32 Azure Fang variants. Jonah learned 7. His favorite used compressed heat to hide the blue color until the final strike. For once I stole an idea from him, fair trade. I practiced fighting without absorbing new magic. That was difficult psychologically. A new spell would come at me, and every instinct screamed free sample. Marcus trained that out of me by throwing useless variations while hiding physical traps. I learned to dodge, sometimes. I learned to lose deliberately in practice to understand an opponent's habits. Evelyn enjoyed that phase too much. She beat me 3 times in 1 week. I remind everyone those were educational losses. Then came the Academy exhibition. It was supposed to be simple. Students demonstrating their growth after the Rift Worm incident. No disaster, no ancient creature, no collapsing sky. For once the day remained normal. My family attended. Traveling mages attended. Teachers from other academies attended. I was asked to demonstrate what zero mana looked like now. I considered using First Light. Marcus threatened me with physical violence, so I chose something safer. I walked into the center of the field. No armor, no weapon, no visible mana. The same way I had stood on the testing platform at 16, someone brought out a crystal. A joke, I placed my hand on it. The crystal read 0. People laughed. Not cruelly this time. They knew. Then I opened my core, not physically. I simply allowed every major stored spell to manifest a harmless outer shape. Fire appeared behind me. Blue Azure Fang, Black Sun Eater Flame, White Dragon Fire. Violet Lightning, Golden Restoration, Dark Curses, Silver Metal, Clear Crystal, Floating Stone. Gravity Rings, Spatial Lines, Shadow Fogs, Solar Light, Absolute Frost, Sound Ripples. Poison Sigils, Magnetic Arcs, Wind Blades, Water Spirals, Meteor Devour, Rift Current, Worldstride. Dozens of legendary Bloodline techniques formed a massive halo above the Academy, not attacking, not colliding. Just existing together. The sky looked like every school of magic had decided to become fireworks. My father stood beside our relatives. Jonah stood closer to the field. Evelyn watched from a tower. Marcus had his arms crossed. Serena smiled. I looked at the 0 reading on the crystal. Then at the hundreds of spell structures around me. For years, 0 had meant I had nothing. Now it meant none of this came from inherited mana. None of it had been waiting inside me. I had learned every piece through impact, pain, observation, failure, and a concerning willingness to stand in dangerous places. I closed my hand, the spells vanished, the crystal still read 0, the crowd erupted. I did not need to shout. I did not need to tell my family they had been wrong. The sky had handled that. Later, my father found me near the practice field. He asked whether I remembered the first Mana test. I said I remembered everyone. He looked ashamed. I did not rescue him from that feeling. Some things should be felt, but I also did not stab the wound. I told him 0 had turned out useful. He laughed. Then he said he was proud of me. I believed him. That did not erase anything. It added something new. That was enough. The next morning, I challenged Serena again. No audience this time. Just Marcus, Evelyn, and Jonah, my people. We went to the mountain plateau, where I had first learned 0 distance crush. Serena stood across from me, one hand in her pocket. Again. I told her that was rude. She took the hand out. Progress, the duel began. She folded space. I opened rift current. She compressed the current. I used world stride. She redirected the route. I expected that. The route opened behind Jonah. He jumped aside as I flew out of it. I apologized. He told me to focus. Serena attacked. Compression blades. I did not absorb them. I dodged. She noticed. Good. I used phantom fog. She ignored it. Expected. I used no light orbs this time. She expected those. Instead, I hid Gregory under the ground. She sensed him. Expected. She compressed the earth. Gregory shattered. Expected. Each fragment opened a tiny world stride route. That was new. Stone fragments disappeared. Serena looked around. Nothing. I attacked directly. Lightning step. Azure fang. Gravity. She answered all 3. Then Gregory returned. Not one serpent. Hundreds of crystal pieces emerged from tiny roots around the entire battlefield. Each carried a harmless light orb. The plateau filled with brightness. Serena folded the light away. I used heat sink. Temperature dropped. She compressed the cold zone. I used thunder choir. Sound distorted. She redirected it. Everything was bait, not to hit her, to make her fold space. Every fold left a tiny current. Rift current could feel them. Worldstride could map them. For 5 minutes, I let Serena reshape the battlefield. Every time she did, I learned the paths. Then I opened all of them. At once, the mountain became connected to itself in hundreds of directions. A punch from the left could emerge from above. A stone dropped down could fall out of the sky. A flame fired forward could arrive backward. Serena smiled. She finally understood. I had turned her greatest strength into my road network. She attacked anyway. 0 distance crush, full power. I opened Meteor Devour, not to absorb. To delay, then Worldstride redirected part of the pressure through 3 separate routes. One into the sky, one into the ground, one behind me. The remaining compression hit. Crystal hide cracked. Eternal ember healed. I stepped through the pressure. Serena raised one hand. I expected distance fold. She expected me to expect it. Instead, she punched me. Normal punch. It hit my nose. I staggered. She laughed. I deserved that. I used kinetic storage on the impact. Saved it. She attacked again. Physical smart. I blocked. Stored force. Again and again. She was building momentum. So was I. Then she folded behind me. I activated personal space. Ban spell. A small repulsion sphere exploded between us. Serena flew backward. Marcus yelled from the edge of the plateau that the spell was banned. I told him we were not at Arcadia, technical victory. Serena recovered in midair. I worldstrode above her. She folded upward. I expected that. My route was empty. I was not inside it. A decoy light orb had triggered the path. I came from below with black step. She compressed downward. I used vector shift. Down became sideways. I slid around the compression field. My palm touched her back. Silence mark. She broke it. Binding thread. She cut it. Gravity well. She folded it. First light appeared. She redirected it. The white star vanished into a fold. I smiled. Serena's eyes widened. First light emerged from another route directly behind me, exactly where I wanted. I absorbed my own spell with Meteor Devour. catching the raw energy after redirect. Then fed that energy into the kinetic storage I had built from Serena's punches. My fist glowed, not with one element, with force, pure accumulated momentum. Serena compressed the space between us. I world-strode through my own mapped network. Her defense turned. I changed routes. She turned again. I changed again, 10 times in 1 second. For the first time, Serena could not know which direction I would emerge from because I did not know until the final moment. I chose the one route she had created at the start of the battle, forgotten. Tiny behind her left shoulder, I appeared. My fist stopped 1 inch from her back. All the stored force waited, enough to crack the mountain. Serena froze. Then she slowly raised both hands. I canceled the kinetic release. Silence. Marcus looked at the position. Evelyn smiled. Jonah shouted before the result was even announced. I had won. Barely. Not because I had more power. Not because I had absorbed her strongest spell. Because I had spent the entire battle learning the battlefield she created and turned her own movement into my final path. Serena turned around. She looked proud, also annoyed, a perfect expression. She said I was ready for the dead sky. I asked when we were leaving. She said I had one problem. I looked down. My coat sleeve was on fire. Apparently first light had leaked during absorption. I put it out. Minor issue. 3 days later, I stood at Arcadia's highest tower with a pack. Evelyn was there. Jonah was there. Marcus was there. My father had already left after the exhibition. I was not leaving forever. That mattered. Arcadia was home now. A strange home full of broken walls, dangerous teachers, and at least one staircase that might still be cursed. But I needed to see what existed beyond the magic I knew. Evelyn wanted to come. Serena said not yet. Evelyn threatened to strike her with lightning. Serena asked if she wanted to donate the spell to me first. Evelyn changed targets and hit me. I absorbed it. Fair. Jonah told me to bring back something worth stealing. I promised. Marcus handed me a new reinforced coat. I asked how many spares he had ordered. He said 40. That felt insulting. Also wise. Then Serena opened the map. I used World Stride. A glowing road formed above the tower, not all the way to the dead sky. I still could not reach that far directly. Our first path led to the Storm Canyon. From there we would follow stronger currents west, then volcanic lines, then oceanic magic. Step by step, no instant victory, no convenient door. I liked that. I looked back at Arcadia, at the arena where everyone had laughed. At the tower I had accidentally damaged more than once. At the people who had watched Zero become something no crystal knew how to measure. For the first time, leaving did not feel like exile. I was not being thrown away. I was choosing a direction. Serena stepped onto the glowing road. I followed. World Stride opened. The academy stretched behind us. The sky became a river of light. Then we were gone. Our first stop was supposed to be simple, a magnetic storm canyon. I had already studied the maps. High lightning concentration, rare mineral monsters. Strong ambient mana, nothing I could not handle. We emerged above the canyon. I landed perfectly. Serena landed beside me. For 5 peaceful seconds, nothing happened. Then the entire canyon lit up. A column of green lightning rose from the ground. Not the sky, the ground. It hit a floating island above us. The island disappeared, not exploded, disappeared. I stared. Serena stared. A second green bolt crawled sideways across the horizon, moving slowly enough for me to see symbols forming inside it. I had never seen those symbols, not in Arcadia, not in the Sky Vault, not in any Bloodline record. My empty core reacted before I did, not with hunger. With pressure, the spell was so dense I could feel its structure from miles away. Serena smiled. I started laughing. Of course I did. I had been born with 0 mana. My family had thrown me away because 0 looked like the end of a scale. They were wrong. 0 was where I started. And somewhere beyond that canyon, beneath a sky filled with magic nobody at Arcadia could name, something fired another impossible spell. This one made the stars move. I stepped forward. Then I raised my hand. Because if the world wanted to keep throwing magic at me, I was finally strong enough to throw something much worse back.